9:30 on Sunday morning, when I'll be asking Lord Frost, Boris Johnson's Brexit negotiator, whether Rishi Sunak can land a deal on Northern Ireland that keeps the Brexiteers happy. I'll also be speaking to the DUP's Sammy Wilson about the Unionists' demands. John Bolton, the former US National Security Advisor under Donald Trump, joins me to discuss the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine, along with Alexei Goncharenko, the mayor of Odessa. All that and more at 9:30 on Sunday.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Coming up in the next hour, is Boris Johnson plotting to take down Rishi Sunak? I'll be asking Boris's biographer, Tom Bauer. Also, a year on from the Russian invasion, will Ukraine be the forever war? I'll be talking to the man who coined that very phrase, top historian Martyn Whittock. And some positive news on a Friday. Marriage is good for your health, apparently. Should we do more to encourage it? You better ask Mrs. Dolan. I'll be debating that story with the twice-married entertainment personality Danielle Lloyd. Plus, the now legendary GBNews clips of the week, highs and lows from a week on the People's Channel. Lots to get through. Of course, we've got all your favourite elements after 9, the big opinion, my take at 10, and Mark Meets. So much to get through, but first, the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. The UK has marked 1 year since Russia first invaded Ukraine, with a minute's silence today. As people across the UK stood silent, at Downing Street, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, stood alongside Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, reflecting on the country's losses. And at Downing Street as well, Britain announced new sanctions, including an export ban on equipment Russia uses on the battlefield, whilst President Putin's closest allies have also been targeted. And in Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky attended a ceremony with families of soldiers killed in the conflict. He described the last 12 months for his country as a year of pain and sorrow, but also of faith and unity. Well, in other news today, detectives investigating the attempted murder of a police officer in Omagh in County Tyrone have made a 5th arrest. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell remains in a critical condition in hospital after being shot outside a sports centre on Wednesday evening. Police in Northern Ireland say they're treating the incident as a terrorist-related incident, with the terror group, the New IRA, the chief line of inquiry. Sinn Féin's Vice President Michelle O'Neill described the shooting as an attack on the entire community.
I think it's important that we continue to send a united message to wider society. We this year celebrate 25 years of our Good Friday Agreement, and so much that's been achieved over those past 25 years. Our society has been completely transformed, and we're not going to allow anybody to reverse any of that progress that's been made. So that's why it's very important that we do put across today that this is an attack on the community, this is an attack on all of us, and this is an attack that none of us will ever tolerate.
Junior doctors are to stage 3 days of strike action next month. The British Medical Association has announced they'll walk off the job from the 13th of March. Nearly 37,000 BMA members voted in favour of industrial action. That's the largest ever turnout for a ballot of doctors. And it follows a series of strikes by nurses and ambulance workers. And lastly, the publishing house Puffin UK has announced that Roald Dahl's classic collection will still be printed using the author's original descriptions and expressions. It follows criticism of the recent editing of his work to remove potentially offensive language. It's understood Puffin UK will continue with the publication of amended texts, as well as continuing to release the original versions. Camilla, the Queen Consort, yesterday urged authors to resist curbs on their freedom of expression. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News, the People's Channel. Time for Mark Dolan.
My reaction to the anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine at 9 o'clock in a Big Opinion special. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Coming up in the next hour, is Boris Johnson plotting to take down Rishi Sunak? I'll be asking Boris's biographer, best-selling author Tom Bauer. Also, a year on from that Russian invasion, will Ukraine be the forever war? I'll be talking to the man who coined that very phrase. Top historian Martyn Whittock joins me shortly. And some positive news on a Friday. Marriage is good for your health, apparently. So should we do more to encourage it? I'll be debating that with twice-married entertainment personality Danielle Lloyd. After 9, as well as my comments on Ukraine, I'll be looking after Sir Kier Starmer, who outlines his 5-point plan for power. I can give you 50 reasons why we don't want a Labour government. Yes, the Tories are terrible, but is Starmer really the answer? That's my Big Opinion at 9. In the Big Question, is it the government's job to feed school children? We'll debate that with Tory legend Edwina Currie and Steffi Curran from Punk Against Poverty. After 10, my Mark Meets guest is quite a character. Model, socialite and aristocrat, Lady Victoria Hervey, who has been romantically linked to Prince Andrew, no less. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. We're going to have a busy evening, so put something cold and fizzy in the fridge or fire up the kettle and let's have a night to remember. Now, the associate editor of The Telegraph, Christopher Hope, soon to be joining GB News, is reporting in today's paper that Boris Johnson has been holding secret talks with the European Research Group of Conservative Brexiteer MPs and the Democratic Unionist Party to help resolve the Brexit crisis in Northern Ireland. As Rishi Sunak closes in on a breakthrough deal with Brussels over Northern Ireland, could Boris Johnson put a spanner in the works and once again place himself at the heart of the Brexit story? And if so, what is his motivation? By stoking divisions within the Tory party and among unionists, is Boris Johnson trying to bring down Rishi Sunak? Let's get the views of his biographer, Tom Bauer, who has written the best-selling book, The Gambler, all about Boris Johnson, and which is out now. Hi, Tom.
Good evening.
Tom, it's great to have you on the programme. Is this a Machiavellian plot by Boris Johnson to unseat Rishi Sunak?
Well, I don't think there's any secret that Boris blames Rishi for his downfall, and he thinks that Rishi plotted against him and by resigning at the beginning then forced the other 60 ministers to withdraw their support for Boris. The trouble is that Boris cannot come to terms with the fact that he lost office, having won his spectacular election victory, all because of his own conduct. It was all his own fault. And he just will not reconcile himself to that reality and that truth. And he has no contrition and doesn't know how to actually rebuild at the moment his popularity. However, there's no doubt that Rishi is playing a very, very strange and I think fatal game in these Irish negotiations, because the ERG group and the DUP are not being taken into his confidence about what he is doing. And I had dinner last night with a leading member of the ERG group who is frankly puzzled. What is Rishi playing? And he's playing at the moment into the hands not only of the EU, but also of Boris. And that is the problem. He's not a proper politician. And he's got, 3 days now to pull the rabbit out of the hat and produce a deal. And at the moment, the thinking is that he doesn't have it.
What are the motivations of the subject of your book, Boris Johnson? Is he driven by revenge or a desire to re-enter number 10?
I think both. And of course he wants to go back to number 10. He realizes that he made some catastrophic errors. But the problem is that he hasn't got, I think, the parliamentary support to get back into office unless Rishi completely mucks up these negotiations with the EU and also has a rotten performance in the May elections. The real problem for Boris is that it was Boris who made Kier Starmer electable. He wasn't electable a year ago. It was only because of Boris's conduct that this whole edifice of Tory supremacy collapsed. And Rishi is not a great politician, and that's being polite. He is allowing Boris the freedom to express his opposition to a deal which is not yet announced, and my belief, not even yet formulated. And that's the problem. Boris is playing games because Rishi is not in total control.
Many fear that the Prime Minister will sell Northern Ireland out to Brussels in this forthcoming deal. Would Brexit be safer in the hands of Boris Johnson?
Well, yes and no. In theory, of course, it would be, because although Rishi is a Brexiteer, he isn't a politician who knows how to get the support of the ERG group, let alone hammer a hard deal with Brussels. We've got to see on Monday what he delivers. The problem is that, of course, there is great sympathy for Boris in the party and across the country. But he is the person who is the architect of his own downfall. And what is to say that he will be able to rebuild the party and support in the country over the following year? And that is the problem. He didn't, in the end, deliver any of the benefits of Brexit when he was Prime Minister. And he allowed this Irish situation to perpetuate itself. It should have been resolved long ago. And so that is the problem that Boris has got, that he doesn't actually offer a solution. All he offers is resistance and dissent. And you can't build support on negatives. You've got to present a positive too.
As party grassroots threaten to oust sitting PMs due to his eviction from Number 10, will this party ever get over Boris, Tom?
Evict MPs. Well, I think that there is a lot of recrimination and the party does have to rebuild itself. The question is whether it can rebuild itself in the next 12 months. If Rishi did deliver a great deal on Monday, which the RG group and the DUP supported, then, of course, there would be a groundswell of support for Rishi. That is the $64 question, which no one at the moment can answer because Rishi is playing such a strange game. But, of course, this manhunt, witch hunt against Boris MPs is very unsavoury. I think it's a mistake for any constituency to remove an MP just because they supported Boris. And the opposite too, especially before an election. It's destabilising and doesn't help anybody. But the party does need new blood. The party needs people who are going to be loyal to whoever is leader. And that is at the moment a questionable commodity.
But of course, Tom, you've written, a capacious biography of Boris Johnson. He has his talents, which are well adumbrated in your best-selling book. But so does Rishi Sunak. Am I the only person on the planet that thinks that shares in Rishi Sunak are too low, given the fact that he has settled the nerves of the financial markets? He looks on target to halve inflation within a year. He's very focused on stopping the boats, which is not something that came up in Kier Starmer's speech yesterday. And I just wonder whether there's more to this guy than meets the eye.
Well, I mean, you could be generous. The problem is this, that he undoubtedly is intelligent and he absorbs a lot of information. The RG group gave him various documents to explain to him the Irish problem, and he read the documents very carefully and was then converted. There's no doubt he was very ignorant about Ireland. It's not part of his hinterland and part of his personal interest, and so he had a lot to learn. The problem is this, he is not a good communicator. He is not a grassroots gutter politician. He is not someone who's actually gone into the heartlands of the working class and campaign. And I always think in my long years as a political observer, you've got to judge a prime minister and leader by his cronies. Who has he got around him? And his appointment of James Forsyth, the political editor of The Spectator, as his political strategist, just revealed Rishi Sunak to be very, very weak in his political understanding. And there's no doubt that everyone who goes into Rishi's office at the moment and sees his advisors, there is Henry Newman still, a man who really doesn't command any respect in the Tory party. There's Lord Bew, a historian who really isn't a politician. And he isn't surrounded by people who engender confidence that he understands the challenge over the next year to rebuild the Tory party, expose all the fallacies and ludicrous assumptions of what the Labour government could do. And that is the problem. He doesn't instill confidence. The question is whether he can do it over the next few months. And Monday's ERG reaction to the Irish, so-called Irish treaty with the EU will be the first real marker of what Rishi Sunak is made of.
Tom Bauer, Ukraine a year on, a low for the world, but one of the high points of Boris Johnson's premiership.
Absolutely. There's no doubt that in his Churchillian historical mould, he did understand the fundamental challenge to our democracy and to the West, and he led right from the beginning, not only in Europe, but also in America, the importance of that issue. There's no doubt that he scored very heavily on that, and Zelensky rightly credits Boris with having turned Europe from what was a very weak position to strengthen and delivering now the tanks and the rest. And that is to Boris's credit. But the problem is that that doesn't win elections. Of course, he's right, but it doesn't mean he understood that levelling huge sums taxes on the British, not getting to grips with the health service, not getting to grips with education and transport and all the other energy problems, the rest, he missed the domestic agenda. So yes, he was great on foreign issues, the key issue of our time, but he was wrong, unfortunately, on so much of the domestic agenda. And that is why the Tories are now being punished, because he, in the end, made Kier Starmer electable. And for that, many people will not forgive him.
Tom, we could spend the hour on the subjects of your various best-selling biographies. Your latest is Revenge, Meghan, Harry and the War Between the Windsors. We saw the popular animated comedy show South Park mock the couple last week with a storyline in which they go on chat shows on their so-called privacy tour. We want privacy, we want privacy. This couple, they've become a laughingstock, haven't they?
Well, thankfully, yes. People have finally realised that what shallow people and adventurers they are, that they are people with little proper credibility. The only person at the moment who I fear doesn't realise what a laughingstock they are is the King of England, who, if we're to believe that he really wants them at his coronation, needs to have his head examined. I mean, they're the last people who should be coming to London in May for that very, very important occasion, because they would absolutely undermine the solemnity and the importance of the coronation. So thankfully, the Sussexes are shooting themselves in the foot and in the head and everywhere else and making themselves our laughingstock and being absolutely now exposed for what they really are, which is money-grabbing attention seekers. But I just hope that King Charles realises they're not welcome in Britain and they're going to do him no good at all.
Tom Bauer, always the greatest joy and privilege to have you on the show. Tom Bauer is the author of The Gambler, a brilliant book on Boris Johnson. Tom Bauer knows Boris better than he knows himself. And that other page-turner, Revenge, Meghan, Harry and the War Between the Windsors is out now, of course, having won rave reviews. Ukraine 1 year on, we'll discuss that with Martyn Whittock next, a top historian who coined the phrase the forever war. Could it be that we'll be debating this in another year's time? Let's hope not. Don't forget, at 9, all your favourite elements of the show. The Big Opinion, in which I'll be dealing with Kier Starmer. He reckons he's got a 5-point plan. Well, I've got 50 reasons why we don't want a Labour government. All of that to come. Tomorrow's papers, my take at 10. Mark meets Lady Victoria Hervey. So much to get through. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In my big opinion, Kier Starmer has outlined his 5-point plan to run Britain. I've got 50 reasons why we don't want a Labour government. I'll be debating that with the brilliant Peter Edwards from Labour List later in the show. Now, today marks a year, as you well know, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What are the implications for you and me in relation to this conflict? Why should we care? Could this conflict be resolved in the next few months with a carefully choreographed peace, which allows both sides to claim victory? Or could this be the forever war, a phrase coined by my next guest, top historian and best-selling author Martyn Whittock? Hi, Martyn.
Good evening. Good to see you again.
Great to have you back on the programme. What does Russia want out of this war, Martyn?
Well, that's a very good question. I think the key thing is, what did Russia want out of this war last February, and what does Russia want out of this war now? And I think those are 2 different questions with 2 different answers. I think last February, Putin wanted a swift military operation. Remember? Special military operation. Of course, it's not a war, as you remember that. Everything was going to be over in 2 weeks. Kiev would fall, Zelensky would flee, a puppet government would be established, the Ruski Mir, the Russian world, would be enlarged and established, a nation whose legitimacy and significance he never recognized its legitimacy, but always thought it was significant, would be brought back into the fold, and the West would be disunited and would let him get away with it, as largely it had when he'd seized Crimea in 2014. Now, those are the plans in 2022. And the problem is they didn't go to plan. The Ukrainians didn't collapse. The West began to wean itself off Russian oil and gas, remained more united than ever. Biden stood firm. So now the question is, what does Putin want now? And I suspect, the other thing is, I think there's a good argument that last year what he wanted was a successful war in 2022, consolidation in 2023, then going to the country for the presidential election in Russia in 2024 off the back of this extraordinary victory. Well, that didn't happen, did it? And I think at the moment his biggest goal is to survive this war. It's difficult now to disentangle him from the war. His State of the Nation speech last Tuesday was basically strong on rhetoric. It's everybody's fault. It's not my fault. It's all the fault of the West. It's all the fault of NATO. Things are going okay. I'm going to pull out of the New START strategic reduction arrangements with America. So now he's doubling down. And I think he's talking as much to his own constituency at home as he is to the world abroad. And he's saying, I'm in it, I'm going to win it, and I'm going to out-resolve you. And I think at the moment, his biggest aim is to stand firm and hope that the resolve of the West weakens before his resolve. Because frankly, at the moment, he has nowhere to go. I suspect he's putting a lot of pressure, if he can put pressure, or pleas rather, to the Chinese to aid him, but they're keeping a distance. We should recognize the fact that although the Chinese have been quite supportive of the Russians, they clearly don't want this war to roll on and roll on. It's bad for the economy, it's bad for themselves. So although they and the Indians, for example, are buying a lot more oil from Russia, which is helping the Russians to keep going. So, for example, the sanctions have caused a 2.2% decline of the Russian economy in the last year, not the 6% decline that was anticipated. So that's doing better than expected. Nevertheless, these major players, India, for example, China, do not want this war to roll on. So I think he is in a bind. He is in a bind. And I think the biggest thing we can hope for now is that those erstwhile allies, China, India, for example, will put pressure upon him in a way that the West simply cannot persuade him to do and say, you have got to come to some sort of negotiation because we are not going to back you forever. He bet the farm and his bet has been called.
OK, well, I'll identify from that last answer that you deem Putin to have made a mistake, that Putin himself feels like he's made a mistake, but he can't turn back time. Do you think the West need to hand Putin a diamond-encrusted golden ladder to climb down? Do we need a stage-managed and choreographed peace that is a win-win for both sides?
This is really important. It's really important that the West makes it clear that our war is not with Russia, that we don't desire the destruction of Russia, we don't desire the dismemberment of Russia. All of that simply fuels Russian nationalism and feeds the Putin narrative, if you see what I mean. We must make it quite clear our war, well, we're not at war, are we? But our position is against him. It's against his regime. And hopefully the message will then get through to those around him that if the boss goes in some form or another, not caused by us, not caused by us, but if the boss goes, then we are willing to do business with whoever comes next. And I think we have to make that clear because at the moment, it's very, very difficult to see a peace that would last. 2 or 3 years ago, Ukraine would never have accepted the loss of Crimea, but would have been prepared to put up with it while they negotiated a future. They would not have been prepared to have officially accepted the loss of the Donbass, but would have been somehow have to live with it while they negotiated a future. There has been such suffering, such loss, that I think Ukraine would now find it almost impossible to accept the loss of Ukraine, the loss of Crimea, the loss of the Donbass. And yet somehow we have to square this circle because Russia is not about to give up those without a considerable escalation of the war, which is it's for nobody's benefit. So our biggest hope is regime change at the heart of the Kremlin, but brought about by the Russian security apparatus. And at the moment, we're a long way from that. There's no signs of that. But these things can change.
2 easy questions for you, Martyn. What chance of nuclear war? What chance of World War III?
I think not a nuclear war, you'd be relieved to know. I think much of this sabre rattling is to frighten us, it's to alarm us, it's a bullying tactic. I think as long as we ensure that NATO does not go specifically head to head with Russia, it's really important we don't give Putin that existential threat that he would like to claim, then I genuinely do think that the nuclear option is him attempting to bully and to cow us. And I have no doubt whatsoever that behind the scenes, through back channels, the Chinese and other people who are supportive of him in some form or another will make it quite clear to him that it is utterly unacceptable to use nuclear weapons of a tactical nature and certainly of a strategic nature. I think we are not on the brink of World War III. On the other hand, we have to handle this very carefully. We must make sure there's no head-to-head clearly between NATO and Russia, and we must stand firm and hope that within Russia itself, the Russian people, particularly within the security apparatus, will begin to move against the boss. But we cannot make regime change happen. I mean, remember Libya, remember Iraq. It doesn't work. We can't do it. We're not about to put tanks in Moscow. You know, our biggest hope is a collapse of morale within Russia and the removal of the boss.
Comprehensive answers there, and I feel I've learned a huge amount, as I always do when I read your books. Martyn Whittock is the author of books on the Third Reich, Norse Myths and Legends, the Vikings, Jesus, the unauthorised biography. How you got access there is anyone's guess. What's the latest book you've got out, Martyn?
Well, as you know, I also wrote the Secret History of Soviet Russia's Police State, which looks at Putin and his police state background, that explains it. I've just delivered to my New York publishers, literally this week, a book called American Vikings, which looks at how the Vikings did get to America. We know that from archaeological evidence now, and how they've influenced American ideas about itself right through to the 21st century, how they appear on alt-right propaganda, how they challenge Columbus in the popular mythology, how everything from Marvel comics through to Hollywood engages with them. So it's called American Vikings, How the Norse Sailed into the Lands and the Imaginations of America. But that's coming out in the autumn.
Well, I look forward to you joining us in the studio to tell us all about it. You're right to mention your book on Russia and the history of the Kremlin, the KGB, fascinating stuff. Martyn Whittock, thank you for your time. We'll catch up soon. Lots more to come, don't forget, at 9 o'clock in a Big Opinion special. My thoughts 1 year on from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Also in my Big Opinion, I'll be making space and time to deal with Kier Starmer, who reckons he's got a 5-point plan for Britain. I've got 50 reasons why we don't want a Labour government. All of that to come, plus my Mark Meets guest. It's socialite, model, you name it, entrepreneur, Prince Andrew's ex, if you believe the papers, Lady Victoria Hervey, live in the studio. Plus the papers, plus my panel, so much more to come. But next up, marriage is good for you. Who knew? See you in 3.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Good news, folks. Marriage is good for you. Just when you thought your other half was sending you to an early grave, new research from the US suggests that those who get married live for longer and have fewer health ailments, with male bachelors, for example, twice as likely to die from heart failure. What a relief. Are we basically in a crisis? Why are people getting divorced when it makes us live longer? Let us discuss all of this with entertainment broadcaster and personality Danielle Lloyd. Hi, Danielle.
Hello, welcome.
It's great to see you on the show. Now, Danielle, you've been married a couple of times. I'm delighted to say, very happily second time round. Do you believe in marriage?
Well, yeah, I told my husband about this statistic before and he was like, well, thank God. I think it's a bit of a crazy one, really, but I think it's down to the fact that I think if you settle down, you don't go out as much, you don't drink as much. I think that's what must be the statistic. I mean, it's not the women that keep the heart attacks.
Well, it isn't. I just wonder though whether it's marriage is better for men than women, because I just wonder whether women are often a calming influence on men, especially with those issues you've talked about, like drinking.
Well, I think if you ask my husband, I'm definitely not calming because I ask him something to do every hour of every single day. So he'd probably be like, no. But I think to be in a relationship and a marriage, I think it's important you have more stability, you are more stable, you have a routine. This is in most people's married, obviously when they're married, but yeah, if you're single, you go out, you do a lot more, you have a lot more fun, so.
But in a world of Tinder where you can find love in the palm of your hand, what's the point in committing to one person?
I couldn't be bothered having more than one. I mean, God's sake, it's hard enough looking after one person, let alone another one. I think it's nice to be in a relationship. I think it's, it's someone to come home to. It's stability. It is, it's someone that loves you for you. And I think, it's easy to go out and have a fling each weekend or whatever, but it is nice. Like, I'd love having a family. Like, if I didn't have my big family, when the boys go away, I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do with myself? It's so quiet. Who am I going to cook for? It gets so, it's not interesting to me. So I love that big family, structured lifestyle. I couldn't be bothered with like the total independence anymore. I'm too old for that.
I wouldn't say that, but I do get your point. Danielle, we all have trouble in love, don't we? We have our ups and downs. You've had a couple as well, I guess, quite well publicised because you're in the public eye. What have you learnt from relationships that didn't work out? What is the key to a happy marriage, do you think?
I think in a happy marriage, you've got to be equal to someone. Like, you've got to feel like you are both as equal as each other and feel like you are, me and Michael are best friends. We do everything together. We go partying together, but then on the same hand, we love the TV shows. We watch the same things. And that is just part of it. You grow old together, and I can imagine us at 8 years old, still going down the beach in Ibiza, but still coming home and watching Bake Off or something.
Yeah, and you'll probably look the way you do now because you're so well preserved. I totally agree. I've been married to Mrs. Dolan for, I better get this right now. We're together nearly 25 years, married for 19 years. And there you go. I dodged a bullet there, didn't I? The important thing is that they're your best friend. I think that's the point, that the foundation of a marriage is friendship. Yes, you need love. A little bit of nookie is always welcome, but friendship is the key.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know what? Nobody's relationship is perfect. We are all going to have arguments. We're all going to have off days. But if you are best friends, you will always work it out.
Now, can we talk about the biggest radio show in the country, Danielle, and that is the mid-morning show on Radio 2, currently hosted by Ken Bruce, a very talented broadcaster, one of my heroes. In his early 70s, he's leaving Radio 2 to be replaced by another talented guy, Vernon Kay, over 30 years younger. Are we an ageist nation?
Do you know what? It's really hard because I don't actually listen to radio because my kids are ageist because all they want to do is listen to Peppa Pig or one of them other little TV programs. So I don't get to listen to very much radio, even when I'm in the car. But what I think is when I do get time to myself in the car, I would like to listen to music from my era. So I will listen to something that I like. So I'm guessing that when you're in that sort of older era where you like to listen to BBC Two, it's pretty sad really when they have to get rid of older presenters to bring in new presenters. I don't think it's going to actually help. It might turn people off.
I totally agree, especially given the fact that, and nothing against Vernon, I'm a really big fan of his, but this guy, Ken Bruce, it was the biggest radio show in the country, 8.5 million people listening to his show every week. It's astonishing that the Beeb have let him go. They did offer him a new contract, but I don't know whether he was offered the kind of cash that Zoe Ball is on for the breakfast show. Let's talk about Iceland, not the country, Danielle, but the supermarket. It looks like they're going to axe several of their branches. Have we fallen out of love with the supermarket Iceland and the idea of frozen food?
Well, I'm actually really devastated about this one because my Iceland by Me has actually closed down, and I got the email and I got the notice through the door, and my kids love Iceland. They sell, it's quick, it's easy. It's always good to have some of their products just in the freezer. If you get one of those nights where you can't be bothered cooking, let's face it, we all have them. And my kid, they sold amazing products from like Greggs, and when I got that email, I was really devastated. I actually really do genuinely love Iceland.
Well, the bottom line is that frozen food is very economical and it lasts forever and it's cheap.
Exactly. And you know what? I seen someone today on the news this morning saying that, frozen or vegetables or fruit is going into meltdown because you can't get hold of it. So they were saying that frozen is just as good. But we've always been told that fresh is better. So it's a bit of a conflict. I don't know.
Well, I think the idea of frozen peas, for example, is that they get frozen on the day that they're picked. So in principle, they're fresher than the ones sitting on a shelf.
Yeah, exactly. And I always use frozen fruit in a smoothie in the morning. I use them in a lot of the stuff that I cook. And I even use frozen broccoli and stuff for the boys and frozen sweet corn. It's so much easier to have in the freezer. It lasts longer and it saves money.
Send my love to your rather handsome husband, wishing you many more years together in holy matrimony, and we'll catch up soon, Danielle.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Brilliant stuff. Entertainment broadcaster, TV personality, the one and only Danielle Lloyd. Lots more to come. Don't forget at 9, in my big opinion, my reaction, my comments on a year on Ukraine, a war the West must win. I'll also be dealing with Kier Starmer, who's got 5 reasons why there should be a Labour government. Well, I could give you 50 reasons why there shouldn't be. That's a big opinion double. That's right, you're doubling your money. A double bill at 9 o'clock. Plus my all-star panel. We got tomorrow's papers, my take at 10. And my Mark Meets guest is the socialite and aristocrat Lady Victoria Hervey, romantically linked to Prince Andrew, no less. She's up later and sparks will fly. But next up, the now iconic clips of the week. Highs and lows from 7 days on the People's Channel. Don't go anywhere.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Late night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for GB News Clips of the Week. 7 days of the highs and lows on the People's Channel. And we start with the brilliant Nana Akua. It's Nana's way or the highway.
If Roald Dahl was alive today, he'd be turning in his grave. If you're anything like me, when one of my producers even dare to change one word or even a comma in my opening monologue, they will hear the words and in an unmistakable touch it and I will kill you tone.
There you go. GB News producers mess with Nana's bits at your peril. Although, hang on a minute. Let's listen to that first bit again.
If Roald Dahl was alive today, he'd be turning in his grave.
Well, I hate to be pedantic, but if Roald Dahl was alive today, he wouldn't be in a grave. At least, I hope not. Maybe the producers should take a look at that monologue. The genius that is Nana Akua is back tomorrow at 4. Now, I really enjoy Michael Portillo's Sunday morning show. It covers politics, arts, culture. It's a great watch. But I didn't realise it was so X-rated. I spat my morning coffee out when I heard this from one of his rather racy guests.
Growing up fast now, so yes, I juggle a lot of balls.
Blimey, please don't boast, it's not polite. Now, I don't know what happened to the channel this week, but that wasn't the only occasion in which the air turned blue. Michelle Dewberry, who I happen to know is a very nicely brought-up young woman, left viewers and listeners in shock with this bombshell.
You didn't see it, actually. When it arrived a couple of minutes ago, it had the biggest head I've ever seen. I don't know where that head's gone. You must have sopped it off.
I think they were trying to send me a message, actually, about a big head or something.
Oh, I'm saying absolutely nothing. I'm saying absolutely nothing.
I think you've said enough already, Michelle. Moving swiftly on, and it's been almost 7 years since we voted to leave the European Union, but top commentators like the excellent Belinda de Lucy still make this classic schoolboy error with regard to the B word.
We're being proven right. This was never about cake. This was always about diluting breakfast to the point that...
Diluting breakfast? How do you dilute breakfast? No bacon? Hold the hash browns? Skip the buttered toast? God forbid. No one's touching my bangers. Back to the brilliant Michael Portillo, whose programme last Sunday celebrated British fashion and tailoring. He even popped into Savile Row to see those beautiful suits being made. And in doing so, he demonstrated extraordinarily accurate powers of detection that would make even Sherlock Holmes jealous.
The business stuff begins here, by the look of it.
Of course, yes. So in the cutting room.
The cutting room. Samuel?
Yes.
Michael?
Pleased to meet you.
So, obviously, cutting goes on here.
Mm-hmm.
Cutting goes on in the cutting room. Who knew? Suits you, sir. Over to Free Speech Nation and the brilliant Andrew Doyle, who every week stands up for women's rights. But even he can get confused about the different genders.
Now from Justine. Where is Justine?
Justin.
Justin, sorry. It does say Justine on my autocue. I wasn't misgendering you.
Misgendered,
yeah.
Has Roald Dahl been at you?
Justin, not Justine. That's pretty awkward. Let's have a look at who Andrew is talking about and we can make our own mind up. There you go. There's Justin or Justine. How could Andrew be so confused? If it is Justine, I'll be honest, she's let herself go. Now, the brilliant Patrick Christie's saying it like it is in relation to that decision by Roald Dahl's publishers to give his books a woke makeover.
The snowflakes have got hold of Dahl, people. The world's gone mad. No, can't say that anyway. Is it the right thing to do, or is censorship by the politically correct brigade absolutely bonkers? You cannot call Augustus Gloop fat. He's now enormous. I'd rather be called fat than enormous. Anyway, either way, he's a fatty, fatty bum-bum. Back in a moment.
Fatty, fatty bum-bum. Patrick's politically incorrect version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory will be out in time for Christmas. Now, the handover is an opportunity to appear at the end of someone else's show to plug your own and tell them what's coming up. And I think it's fair to say that I nailed this one when I popped in to say hello to Neil Oliver. I think that's what he's called.
Next up, it's Mark Dolan tonight. Mark, what have you got?
Nick, thank you so much for another brilliant party. That's my nickname, of course. That's my little private name for you. Neil Oliver, what a show. And there's your clips of the week. Slightly embarrassing there. Senior management have been in touch. They've got me in for a refresher course to remind me what all of the presenters at GB News are called. I think I've got it right now. This is the guy that does the primetime show during the week. It's Dave Wotton. I think that's right. No spin, no censorship. This is... talk about this guy. He's on at 9:30 every morning. Bob Harwood. What a fan. The Queen of Breakfast, Annabelle Webster. And last but not least, Nigella Farage. The jewel in GB News' crown. Quite a hottie. Now, I'm thoroughly enjoying Camilla Tominey's brand new Sunday morning politics show. But in conversation with Cabinet Minister Penny Mordaunt, she might be guilty here of oversharing. I think we've entered the realms of too much information, Camilla.
Interventions by Prime Ministers should be like sex in a long and happy relationship. Infrequent, but also always anticipated with glee.
I'm not married, Camilla. I can't comment on the metaphor there.
Penny Mordaunt there, lucky to be unmarried. It doesn't sound like she's missing out on much. I do hope Mrs. Dolan isn't watching. We finish with yet more spicy language on the channel this week. This guest speaking to the marvellous Bev Turner, raising more than a few eyebrows.
It wasn't me, but my colleague was working on the archives in Vindolanda and came across this object. And he's an expert in ancient wood, and I am the expert in Roman dicks, apparently.
Yeah, sometimes the jokes just write themselves. And those are your clips of the week. If you see anything or if you hear anything clip-worthy, drop me a line, mark@gbnews.uk. Coming up in my big opinion, as Sir Kier Starmer outlines his 5-point mission for power, I can give you 50 reasons why we don't want a Labour government. Yes, the Tories are terrible. But is Starmer really the answer? In the big question, is it the government's job to feed school children? Look forward to hearing from Tory legend Edwina Currie and Steffi Curran from Punk Against Poverty. Lots to get through. A busy 2 hours to come. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 9 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, as Sir Kier Starmer outlines his 5-point plan for power, I can give you 50 reasons why we don't want a Labour government. The Tories are terrible, but is Starmer really the answer? My Mark Meets guest is Lady Victoria Hervey, the royal insider who has starred in reality TV shows, penned best-selling books and has been romantically linked to more than one very big name, including Prince Andrew. In the big question, is it the government's job to feed school children? Edwina Currie will debate that with us very shortly. Plus, of course, my take at 10. Looking forward to debating that. A very, very hot topic indeed. A bunch of workers around the world have found out that a 4-day week works great for them. Of course it does. When did the West give up the work ethic? Lots to get through. But first, the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you and good evening. The UK has marked 1 year since Russia first invaded Ukraine today with a minute's silence. People across the UK stood to respect the silence, and at the Downing Street, the Prime Minister reflected on the country's losses with Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. Also today, Britain has imposed new sanctions, including an export ban on equipment Russia uses on the battlefield. And in Ukraine itself, in the capital Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky attended a ceremony with families of soldiers killed in the conflict. He described the last 12 months as a year of pain and sorrow, but also of faith and unity. In other news today, the Prime Minister could soon announce a new post-Brexit deal for Northern Ireland after holding what was said to be a positive call with the EU Commissioner. Rishi Sunak is likely to meet Ursula von der Leyen to discuss the Northern Ireland Protocol this weekend and is also expected to reveal a new deal on Monday. Number 10 says he's had constructive talks with supermarkets and businesses about the issues he's trying to fix. In an exclusive interview with GB News, James Cleverly told us how the government is approaching negotiations.
We remain focused on the outcome rather than the method, and the outcome is to protect Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom, to make sure that people and businesses and the political representatives of those people in Northern Ireland are comfortable with the resolution, whilst also making sure that we protect the UK internal market. Those are very much our motivations. That's what will drive our actions.
And you can see our exclusive interview with the Foreign Secretary in full tomorrow at midday, right here, GB News. Now, in other news today, detectives investigating the attempted murder of an officer in Omagh in County Tyrone have made a 5th arrest. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell remains in a critical condition in hospital after being shot outside a sports centre on Wednesday evening. Police in Northern Ireland say they're treating the incident as a terrorist-related incident, with the new IRA their chief line of inquiry. And the publishing house Puffin UK has announced that Roald Dahl's classic collection will still be printed using the author's original descriptions and expressions. It follows criticism of the recent editing of his work to remove potentially offensive language. It's understood Puffin UK will continue with the publication of amended texts, as well as to continuing to release the original versions. Camilla, the Queen Consort, even yesterday urged authors to resist curbs on their freedom of expression. That's all from me. I'm back in an hour.
He hoped it would be short. But following his invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin has blood on more than just his hands. This atrocious and evil act has resulted in immeasurable bloodshed on both sides and colossal infrastructural damage to Ukraine itself, which will take decades to recover. Who knows whether Vladimir Putin's ambitions lie beyond Ukrainian territory, but with NATO countries nearby and the possibility of World War III and nuclear Armageddon not impossible, Putin must be thwarted. There's no point second-guessing Putin or hoping for the best, and there's absolutely no point in appeasement. We've been there before. It's in the interests of the Ukrainian people and the free world that Putin is defeated. However many bullets, however many tanks, and however many planes are needed, this is a war that all of us need Ukraine to win. And tonight, our thoughts are with not just the brave soldiers, but the ordinary people of Ukraine who have been through 12 months of hell, and many of whom have taken up arms against Putin themselves. Let us pray that we're not here in 12 months' time, lamenting further bloodshed and an emboldened, reckless, and even more dangerous Vladimir Putin. This war must be won by the West coming together, and Putin must be put in his place. More reaction to the dreadful anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine in the papers at 10:30. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. In My Big Opinion, coming up as Sir Kier Starmer outlines his 5-point plan for power, I can give you 50 reasons why we don't want a Labour government. The Tories are terrible, but is Starmer really the answer? In The Big Question, is it the government's job to feed school children? We'll debate that with Tory legend, of course, broadcaster, best-selling author Edwina Currie and Steffi Curran from Punk Against Poverty. Sparks will fly. What do you think? Should the government be responsible for feeding our kids? Also tonight, one night earlier than usual, the Queen of US showbiz and royal reporting, Kinsey Scofield. She'll give us the verdict after the Queen Consort waded into the row over the rewriting of Roald Dahl's books. A victory against wokeism. In Mark Meets, I'll be meeting Lady Victoria Hervey, the royal insider who has starred in reality TV shows, penned best-selling books, and has been romantically linked to a couple of high-profile celebrities, including Prince Andrew, no less. She thinks, by the way, he's been done up like a royal kipper in relation to Virginia Giuffre. We'll discuss that live at 10. At 10:30 sharp, tomorrow's papers with full panel reaction. Before that, in my take at 10, employees trialling a 4-day week have declared it a huge success. Well, of course they have. When did the West give up the work ethic? Who's going to pay the bills if workers aren't willing to put a shift in? The 4-day week might be convenient, but it's a race to the bottom. That's my take at 10 in an hour. So much to get through, but let's meet my wonderful panel now. Former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. Author and journalist, Laura Dodsworth. And former advisor to Boris Johnson, political commentator Kulveer Ranger. I want to hear from you throughout the show, mark at gbnews.uk. The best bit of the programme is when you get in touch, and this programme has a golden rule. What is that rule? We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So for the next 2 hours, big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. We now live in an upside-down, topsy-turvy world where north is south and south is north, where a man is a woman and a woman is a man, where printing money doesn't cause inflation, plot spoiler, it does, and where a Labour government is somehow the answer to Britain's problems. Sir Kier Starmer has outlined his so-called 5-point mission, presumably to rival Rishi Sunak's 5-point plan. Starmer's are to secure the highest sustained growth in the G7, build an NHS fit for the future, make Britain's streets safe, break down the barriers to opportunity at every stage, and make Britain a clean energy superpower. Sounds lovely. But how is Kier Starmer possibly the answer to our economic issues, given the fact that he will likely yield to public sector workers on strike and their inflation-busting pay demands? And how will he tackle our eye-watering national debt, fueled by the lockdowns, of which, of course, he was such a big fan, by borrowing further billions to splash the cash in the public sector, which, of course, he will be expected to do if he reaches number 10. How is Kier Starmer the answer to our policing problems, given the fact that statistics covering the year to September 2022 show that in England and Wales, there was an average of 1.2 robbery offences per 1,000 people in areas controlled by Labour police and crime commissioners, roughly double that of other areas which showed just 0.6% robbery offences per 1,000 people. Do you think Kier Starmer, the most woke politician in the country, someone who will seize any opportunity to signal his virtue, is going to crack down on woke policing in which cops spend more time turning up at people's houses for an offensive Facebook post than addressing real crime? Presumably, Starmer's plan for the NHS is to pump more billions into this financial black hole, which is getting more expensive and worse by the day. Will Sir Kier Starmer get rid of some of the 3,500 middle managers on six-figure salaries currently employed by the Health Service? Will he get rid of the diversity officers for what is the most diverse employer in the world? Good luck with that. He said he's going to break down barriers to opportunity at every stage, a pledge vaguer than the details of Nadhim Zahawi's tax return. And then there's the environment. Now, I want to clean up the planet as much as anyone, but Starmer wants to clean out the nation's coffers with an expensive plan to get Britain carbon neutral by 2030. Insulating millions of homes, extraordinarily expensive, rolling out an electric infrastructure and betting the house on green energy. Laudable though it may sound, and I do believe in home insulation, this radical push to go green as countries like China and America continue to pollute like fun is a crazy and costly experiment, particularly given the fact that Starmer is going to create a terrifying 1970s-style state-owned energy company, investing our borrowed billions in flaky renewables. Yikes. We're not just living in an upside-down, topsy-turvy world. The cervix-free leader of the opposition is topsy-turvy himself, banging on about defending women's rights whilst taking the knee to so-called gender ideology, which challenges the very idea of biological sex. Remember, he can't even say what a woman is, even though he's married to one. 5 years of Kier Starmer means 5 years of more woke hell. And Starmer is pretty upside down and topsy-turvy when it comes to magic grandpa himself, former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, previously campaigning for him to be Prime Minister, on record as saying that Corbyn would be a great Prime Minister, whilst now evicting the same man who hasn't really said anything different from what he said before. Jeremy Corbyn, as Prime Minister, would have been a national security and economic disaster for the country. Starmer campaigned for him to get the top job. He was an enabler, if you like, an accomplice. Now Starmer is campaigning for the same man to be chucked out of the party. Doesn't show great judgment, does it? Starmer is topsy-turvy and upside down on nationalisation, which he wanted when he ran for the leadership, but which now he doesn't. Don't get me wrong, the Tories are disastrous. But they finally got, in my view, somebody sensible in charge. It's not a great choice, but if it is a choice between Sunak and Starmer, I'll take Sunak all day long, with his plan to stop the boats, which doesn't even make Starmer's list of 5, if he achieves the halving of inflation and if he tackles our horrific debt. I think Sunak's 5-point plan is more in tune with what the people of Britain actually want. Give me 5. Meanwhile, Kier Starmer thinks his plan is the Fab 5. Well, I beg to differ. Starmer's so-called 5 missions are all mission impossible. Now, what's your view? Many would argue that Starmer has transformed the Labour Party, that he has rid it of the ghost of anti-Semitism, that he has stood up to the Corbynites and the hard left, and that he's offering a mainstream platform, which, of course, won Tony Blair 3 election victories. Starmer's supporters, Labour's supporters, would argue the Tories have made a Horlicks of the economy, they made a Horlicks of the pandemic, and that it's time for a change. What is your view? Mark at gbnews.uk. Reacting to that, my fantastic panel of the wonderful former editor of Labour List, none other than Mr. Wonderful, the one and only Peter Edwards. We also have author and journalist Laura Dodsworth and former advisor to Boris Johnson and political commentator Kier Ranger. I've got to start with the former editor of Labour List, the one and only Peter Edwards. Peter, good to have you back. Starmer's got 5 reasons why he wants to be Prime Minister. I've got 50 demonstrating he must never be.
Well, I think that's nonsense, really. And you were being so polite to me, I thought you might start with me. But actually, a lot of your monologue wasn't really accurate. Let's just take one, for example. One of the pledges is about public safety. So is Kier Starmer woke or wet or soft, or is he actually someone that wants to invest in public services to make our streets safer? So, for example, when Kier Starmer ran the Crown Prosecution Service, a national organisation which gives him leadership skills, the conviction rates for rape and sexual offences increased. So he's in a leadership role, he made good decisions, and the outcome was better for the public. On NHS, I think every party has gone into pretty much every election pledging to spend a bit more. But we all know from now on it's about reform, isn't it? Because the demographic change means demand is rising and rising. And I'll give you one more. We could talk about this for longer, but I'll give you one more on Corbyn. Pretty much every party member campaigns their leader to be Prime Minister. That's completely unremarkable. But rather than being conflicted over the man you called Magic Grandpa, who would not have made a very good Prime Minister, Kier Starmer's been quite tough. On day one of his leadership in 2019-2020, he apologised to the Jewish community over anti-Semitism, and obviously Corbyn was negligent in his failure to tackle anti-Semitism. And Jeremy Corbyn is suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party. So I think Kier Starmer has been consistent. He's also been strong. But he's also, and perhaps this is where we diverge most, Mark, that I think he's in tune with public opinion. And while the leadership aren't taking anything for granted, if you've got a 20-point lead in the opinion polls, that would imply that he is on the same page as great swathes of the public.
Laura Dodsworth, Kier Starmer is responsible for more flip-flops than an Ibiza gift shop.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm going to have to pull you up on your flip-flop first, Mark. What's your pledge? Never boring. And yet here we are talking about Kier Starmer. So I saw your story list tonight. I get to the words Kier Starmer and literally my eyes glaze over. The man is so boring. I can't even hear the words he's speaking. In terms of flip-flopping, yes, I completely agree. I mean, after all, he pledged to scrap tuition fees. He's already reneging on that. He thought Shamima Begum should be repatriated until he didn't. I'm actually bored of pledges now. You know, even the Tory party's not immune. They pledged not to raise taxes and then they did. So these 5 pledges that politicians are developing a habit of delivering us are, well, they're just disappointing. They're just disappointing, and it's hard to even hear Kier Starmer enunciate the words. What is it about him? Why is he so Magic Grandpa?
Well, I know. I mean, I must say that Corbyn was certainly a more compelling personality. But let's defend Kier Starmer, Kier Ranger. There's nothing boring about a 28-point lead in the polls.
There isn't. And, you know, quite rightly, Kier Starmer is trying to take advantage of that. But I'll challenge Peter on this because I don't think it's Kier Starmer's lead. It's one that the government has provided the opposition. And it's now about what will the opposition do to justify having the trust of the electorate at the next election. And we're talking a lot about Sir Kier Starmer, and we should, because actually what people want to know is what does he believe in. And, Peter, you're right, he's been terribly consistent at being inconsistent. He has moved a lot.
I didn't say that. It was Mark that said that.
Well, I thought you said he was consistent. So I say you're right, he's being consistent, but he's not being consistent. And that's why the public need to understand what Sir Kier Starmer will be about. And he needs to actually much like other political parties, stop putting out random pledges, but start defining what he believes in, and actually what this Labour Party under his leadership believes in. We all knew, whether we liked it or not, what Jeremy Corbyn believed in, and that's one reason, actually, regardless of whether we agreed with his policies and his ideals, we respected him. Respect is gained when people are consistent in what they believe in, and that's what people are looking for from Kier Starmer if he wants to be Prime Minister. So pledges, waffly, talking about a decade of renewal, yes, all very good, but it's his beliefs that we want to understand and then to see if the electorate will trust him.
Peter, you're a touch out. Laura,
can I say something about this decade? I mean, that's absolutely shameless to be talking about a decade. What he's trying to bluster is that he's got the confidence that Labour will win 2 terms. I mean, it's a bit much to be promising a decade of renewal when he's not even in office yet. And one more thing, I've got to pick up on what you said, Mark, because you talked about biological sex. I think the idea of voting for a leader who will not define men and women is dangerous. I mean, anybody who can't say what the difference between a man and a woman is mad, bad or dangerous. I will not vote for a party that won't actually explain what biological sex is and stand up for women's sex-based rights. The Labour Party has a woman problem.
Peter, you're a touch outnumbered. I will give you the right to reply. Do you think that issue of trans rights is going to be a problem for Kier Starmer in certain parts of the country next year?
I think it's going to be a challenge for all politicians, and my view is I want, as I'm sure you do, Mark, I want trans people to be treated with dignity while whoever is in government navigates their way through the legislative hurdles that I suspect are coming over the next decade or so. But I'd say, much as I think equality is important to you and I, the number one and the number 2 and the number 3 issue at the general election are not going to be trans issues. And in 20 years of membership of the Labour Party, so far it's not come up on the doorstep. Maybe that will change. Where I take issue, perhaps, is with Colville and the phrase random pledges. Again, let me just give you one example, because I don't want to talk about it all night. A Labour conference, Kier Starmer pledged a great British energy firm. Well, we're in an energy crisis, we're in an inflation crisis, and our supplies are being cut off and affected and increased in price by the horrific events in Ukraine. So what is random and what is unsensible about committing to set up a great British energy company with domestically sourced energy to get the prices down for everyone?
But, Peter, that would not have solved the problem that the country has faced from the outcome of Ukraine, from the issues of supplies. Having an energy firm that is then state-run and state-controlled would not have solved the problems that we have faced, and that's clear. So, you know, the fallacy of taking state and government-controlled and that solve everything, we just know that isn't.
It's about security of supply, not ownership.
Oh, there you go. And many would argue we need that security of supply. I think you'll agree. I've got a brilliant panel tonight. They don't agree, which is the whole point about the show. Get your emails in. Are you ready for a Labour government? Do you want a Labour government? Are you impressed by Kier Starmer's 5-point mission to change Britain for the better? Coming up in the news agenda this hour, will we ever solve the Channel migrant crisis? My Mark Meets guest is Lady Victoria Hervey, Prince Andrew's ex, no less. But next in the big question, is it the government's job to feed school children? We'll debate that with Steffi Curran from Punk Against Poverty and the no-nonsense former Conservative Cabinet Minister Edwina Currie. Sparks will fly. See you in 3.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A big reaction to my big opinion. Let's have a look at what you're saying. Kier Starmer has announced his 5-point mission for power. I can think of 50 reasons why he mustn't become our Prime Minister. This from Richard. Mark, Starmer is the perfect answer to bankrupting the public purse, relegating biological women to the corridors of history, creating a world of woke we will never recover from, and returning us to the fold of Europe by stealth. Starmer will walk in whatever flip-flops he needs to in order to get into power. Richard, thank you for that very well-crafted email. Philip says, hi, Mark, I'm a Tory supporter and I agree with much of what you say, but your expressed views are so biased. You criticise NHS executives on 6-figure salaries, but under whose watch were they appointed? Nuff said Phil. Well, Phil, you are right. The Tories have been in charge during the woke takeover of our country. An appalling overreaction to the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw the failed experiment of lockdowns. Only my opinion. I know they were trying to save lives. I believe it failed. So, Phil, bravo. You're dead right. And thank you for putting me straight on that one. More of your emails to come. Mark at gbnews.uk. But first, let's do one of these. It's like magic. It's time for the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. The London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has announced that children in the capital's primary schools will receive free school meals for the next academic year at a cost of over £130 million. Many see this as an important step to helping families in a cost of living crisis and nourishing our youngsters so they can concentrate in the classroom, grow, develop and be healthy. But is it the government's job to feed our school children? Does this move set a dangerous precedent about just how much the state can do in our lives, particularly given the parlous state of the country's finances? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former Conservative Minister, best-selling author and broadcaster Edwina Currie, and Steffi Curran, a tireless campaigner who runs the Punk Against Poverty organisation. Steffi, a warm welcome to the show. I believe your first appearance on Mark Dolan tonight. Great to have you. Do you think that Kier Starmer, there you go, get them all confused, Sadiq Khan is right to make school meals free for all primary school kids in the capital?
Absolutely. I think it is fantastic and it needs to be done across the country. Absolutely.
Why is it the job of the government to feed school children? We have a welfare state. Of course, many of the kids in those schools will come from middle-class homes who can afford those meals.
I think we need to stop looking at it as whether it's the job of the government or not. It's about investing in the future of the country. The kids that are at school, at primary school today, are going to be the people who are driving buses, working in supermarkets, nurses. You know, they're the people who are going to be taking care of us when we're older. So we need to be investing in them to give them the best possible start. And it's been proven that free school meals help with that. So, you know, education and looking after kids is the job of the government. So why can't food come under that as well?
Edwina Curry?
Well, I think there are a number of issues with that, bearing in mind, of course, that it's already very nearly 2 million children in England that are getting free school meals, in most cases because their families are on universal credit or job seekers allowance or they're refugees. So we're already looking after quite a lot. And it's nearly £1 billion. And what Sadiq Khan has done, and we'll push it over the billion. So it's quite a lot of money. Personally, I would prefer, if we are going to be investing in the next generation, to be investing in their education. And that will make the biggest difference of all. I'm fully in favour of free school meals for those who need it. But somewhere along the line, I mean, this has been happening the whole of my lifetime, so it's nothing new. But somewhere along the line, we're kind of wiping parents out of all of this, aren't we? And the role of parents, I think should be enhanced. I think it should be supported. I think it should be encouraged. I mean, effectively, if you think about it, Mark, in many parts of the country, we've made fathers redundant. They don't seem to be needed. And as a result, we have so many fathers who abandon their families at the first opportunity, which is a great tragedy and has a really damaging effect on the children. So let's get our priorities right. Let's educate the children first. Let's support the families. Let's support the schools. Let's make sure that those children in households where money is really a big issue, not the well-off ones, that they do get their free school meals. Maybe extend that into the holidays as well. But if the state takes over the role of parents, we shouldn't be too surprised if those kids have an awful lot more problems and troubles in future.
Steffi Curran?
Feeding kids is education. There is so much evidence that shows that, as well as lowering obesity, free school meals are linked to improved academic performance. They reduce absenteeism, and it's linked to improved lifetime productivity. Getting the kids fed so that they can focus on learning is so important. The cut-off point for free school meals at the moment across the country is £7,400. Anyone earning over that is not getting free school meals. It's so low, and there are so many families in poverty. We need to be supporting these kids so that they do have a future, and so that our country has a future.
Isn't this,
I would agree with you.
Okay, Edwina, come in.
I would agree with you entirely. And I think the level is too low. In Northern Ireland, for example, it's 14,000. It's a huge difference. I agree with you that the level is now too low. It was set some time ago, and I think that should be looked at very, very carefully. Fully supportive of families who are in need, getting some help in this way. And of course, the schools then also get a pupil premium, which enables them to do more for those families and children. But the idea that somehow we'll get rid of childhood obesity by giving every child a free school meal, what do you think the parents are going to do with that spare money they've then got after school? They're just going to buy them more sweets and chocolates and crisps. That's a nonsense, absolute nonsense.
There is no spare money. That's the problem. There is no spare money. Parents are having to go without food to feed their children. I don't know where you think this spare money is coming from. It doesn't exist. None of the families that I work with have spare money.
Those families where they are struggling, they get free school meals. And you and I agree that that level should be slightly higher. What about, I mean, we're talking about around 29%. It's about a quarter of all children right through the United Kingdom and right through England, and in the poorest parts, such as in Newcastle and many areas, we're talking about nearly a third. But what about the other 2/3? Are we really saying that we should tax them in order to give the money back to them in terms of free food? I really don't see that supports the role. I'm sure you support the role of parents. You've not mentioned them at all. They are really, really important, and we should be doing everything we can to support them, to keep them informed so they know what is healthy, what is good, what is strong for their children, and to enable them to work in partnership with the schools to promote the welfare and education of the next generation.
Steffi, I've received an email. Steffi, let me interrupt you for a second, one moment. I've received an email, Steffi, from Steve, who says, Mark, they're not free school meals. The taxpayer pays the bill. And, of course, the country is broke, isn't it, Steffi? We've got £2 trillion worth of national debt. We've got a budget deficit, which means more goes out than comes in every month. We just can't afford this. And where does it stop? Are we going to feed kids after school, before school? Is this not an excuse for bad parents to think, that's another thing I don't have to do, feed my kids?
This is an investment in economic growth. It has been proven that through having the free school meals, kids will do better. This is how we can improve what the kids are coming out of school at the end of it with in terms of their education, their employment chances. If we want to invest in the country, we need to do it at the very beginning, at the primary schools. And one of the biggest things you can do, and it's the simplest thing, and it's very cheap, it's very cost effective, is feed the kids. Parents cannot afford to feed them, so let's do that for them.
Briefly, Edwina?
There's a fallacy here. There's a fallacy here. I haven't seen the research, you're not quoting the sources, but the fallacy here is if you take children who are not being fed by their parents and you feed them at school, of course their performance will improve. But if you take children who are otherwise being well looked after by parents who've got enough money and who put their children's welfare first, then I cannot see that actually feeding them a lower quality meal in school is going to improve anything, except it's going to end up taking more money out of taxpayers' pockets, and it's diminishing the role of parents. It's also meaning you're not making any effort to educate and support and inform parents and carers on what actually is good, healthy food. And that seems to me a big, big mistake.
Steffi Curran, let me put it on record that your work as a campaigner as part of Punk Against Poverty is truly amazing, and thank you for contributing to this debate. Fascinating conversation. Steffi Curran there from Punk Against Poverty, and former Conservative government minister, best-selling author and broadcaster Edwina Currie. My panel there divided. What's your view? Is it the government's job to feed school children? Mark at gbnews.uk. Lots to come. Next up, will we ever solve the Channel migrant crisis? Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Should the government be responsible for feeding school kids? Short and sweet from Phil. Mark, the parents had them. Parents should feed them. If you can't afford kids, don't have them. Reacting to the big stories of the day, my all-star panel, Peter Edwards, former editor of Labour List, Laura Dodsworth, author and journalist, and Kier Ranger, political commentator and former advisor to Boris Johnson. Remember him? Now, actually a former colleague of Boris's, Tory MP Kit Malthouse, has put forward his three-point plan to solve the issue of migrants crossing the Channel to enter the country illegally. Malthouse thinks the small boats crisis can be solved by agreeing with the French that all intercepted migrants will be returned to France immediately by boat, and in return we will take a genuine refugee from inside France, at a stroke removing the incentive to cross. Sounds workable on paper, but would it pass muster in reality? And is solving the Channel migrant crisis even possible? Will we ever get to the bottom of this? Kier Ranger, no doubt you've reflected on this issue for a long, long time. What's your view?
I have, and Kit's an old colleague of mine from City Hall days as well.
Policing minister.
He was policing. He was Deputy Mayor for Policing while we were there.
And he did a good job. He cut crime, didn't he?
He did. He cut crime. Actually, we came in at a spike in knife crime in 2008. We did a lot of work with Boris and Kit around getting knife crime down. But the good thing about Kit, and he is actually a fine politician, as he's shown in years after that, is he does think outside the box. Now, as you say, this idea of actually a real refugee being brought in rather than, you know, the ones that are paying through the nose to these traffickers, maybe can dampen down that traffic business, because it's the business model that we need to break, not the refugees that need the support. So that's his logic around it. But as you say, on paper it sounds elegant, but we know these things are ugly, crude about how this situation is growing. And I'm not sure it'd be a simple one-in, one-out case, and that we'd easily destroy this model that these traffickers have. I think there has to be more done, and really we've got to throttle the serpent. We've really got to cut off this supply, because if we just change the answer to say, well, we won't do it this way, we'll do it that way, we don't actually solve the problem of an endless stream of refugees coming through.
Throttle the serpent. Are you the one that writes those one-liners for Boris Johnson?
Not at the moment.
I mean, throttle the serpent, that's vintage Boris Johnson, isn't it? But it's come from the words of his former advisor, his very humble and self-effacing advisor, Kier Ranger. What do you think about this, Laura? Will we ever tackle the migrant crisis?
I think this is going to become so pressing that the serpent will have to be throttled. The thing is, you know, the riot in Knowsley has shown that people have absolutely got migrant fatigue, and there are only so many hotel spaces. I mean, something I thought was really interesting about the way that whole thing was covered was a lot of the mainstream media, you know, the liberal media, never talked about what was lying behind the riot. That doesn't mean I'm excusing disorder and violence. I'm not. But if you read, for instance, the BBC coverage, there's not one mention of a migrant propositioning an underage girl. You know, not one mention of it. And unfortunately, if this is just left, you can't bury it, you can't suppress it. There will be disorder, there will be too much dissent that no amount of sanitising in the media will be able to disguise.
Peter?
Well, I'm not sure it's been sanitised in the media. It's discussed regularly on GB News. It's on the front page of many newspapers, and it's discussed in House of Commons.
Not on the Beeb, not on Sky News?
No, I wouldn't say that. I don't watch Sky too much, but I've read a lot of stories on BBC Online about the migrant crisis, and I think it is a crisis. And, you know, in the spirit of kind of not being party political, I agree with Colville. We've got to kill the trade that lies behind it all, because although every life lost at sea is a tragedy, and often people are coming from horrific circumstances, behind that there's an economic motivation by which probably a relatively small number of pretty wicked people are getting rich by sending people out in boats. But coming back to Britain and the events of Knowsley, where I don't know if anyone followed it, but there was a riot within the last few weeks that was very unpleasant, and people broke the law in their arrests. Laura, what did you mean by migrant fatigue?
I think that although the media doesn't cover it too much, a lot of ordinary people feel that there are obviously too many migrants coming over on the channel, and too many people put up in hotels. And I think there's a general feeling that while people are economically suffering and, you know, enduring a cost of living crisis, they feel resentment at seeing people in hotels.
OK, one more question, please. This goes to the heart of, and I don't know your politics, but certainly the Conservative government cloud this issue deliberately. When you say too many people, do you mean legal migrants, illegal migrants, or asylum seekers?
I'm not sure. I can't speak for what everyone thinks.
No, I'm just interested in your view.
Well, the government currently doesn't know the difference between those groups.
It does, and it conflates it deliberately to whip up anti-migrant sentiment, however you define a migrant.
But what about those communities impacted by hundreds of migrants accommodated in hotels? We've heard stories from Cornwall, Newquay, elsewhere, of youngsters, you know, young women being followed home by Albanians, who, by the way, shouldn't be in this country illegally, given the fact that Albania is a peaceful country. It's affecting real people, and they're angry.
It's a serious issue. I cut my teeth as a reporter in Carlisle, in Cumbria, and I spent longest as a reporter in West Yorkshire. So this is something that affects the United Kingdom. And let's not talk about individual groups, but let's understand the main point, which is whenever there's migration, that can lead to community tensions, either if there isn't law and order, or if there's pressure on public services, the classic ones being school places and trying to get a GP's appointment. Now, that applies to just having a larger number of people than public services set up for, regardless of whether they're legal migrants, illegal migrants or asylum seekers, because everyone gets ill and everyone needs a doctor's appointment. So wherever there's a population growth, government needs to invest in public services. But I do feel, Laura, you're hinting at a concern, but you're not really spelling it out. What do you mean by migrant fatigue?
I've already said what I mean by it. I can't tell you. I can't speak for the whole nation. I sense there's a feeling that there is migrant fatigue, and I'm not sure that people do split it out by different group. I think one of the marks of a civilised nation, for instance, is taking in asylum seekers, but obviously there has to be a cap.
Are you fatigued about asylum seekers then?
I was never speaking for myself, and I don't...
And what's your view?
Communities are being impacted by you know, often small towns in which there's a full hotel of whether it's asylum seekers, illegal migrants, but it's people from elsewhere who are impacting their quality of life and, in some cases, their safety.
I think where we're coming to here is, and I would say it's not, in my view, it's not migrant fatigue. What we're seeing is a problem that the government is not dealing with the acceptance of the asylum seekers and migrants that we want to bring here. So whether it be the Afghan refugees, whether it be the Ukrainian refugees, whether it be the asylum seekers, yes, a civilised country, a country that is wealthy, would like to welcome them. But if our government and our processes can't sustain them and bring them through to join society rather than getting stuck in hotels and impacting local communities in a way that feels negative and putting pressure on public services, then people quite rightly get concerned about what's happening around campus.
Well, look, we'll return to that conversation when we have the papers at 10:30. A couple of stories of that nature as part of the papers. Full panel reaction. My Take at 10 is coming up in just a few minutes' time. When did the West give up the work ethic? My Mark Meets guest live in the studio, Lady Victoria Hervey, Prince Andrew's ex, so we're told. But next, the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting a day early, live from Hollywood, California. And another howler from President Biden. Kinsey Scofield's next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Well, it's time now for US News with the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Scofield. Hi, Kinsey.
Hi, Mark. So excited to see you on a Friday.
Great to have you a day early. So excited about your trip to London in May for the coronation. We look forward to welcoming you in the studio and rolling out the red carpet. Apologies in advance, Kinsey. The clock's against us. It's been a busy hour, lots to cover tonight. But let's talk about some important issues in relation to the royal family and the Queen Consort, Camilla, in the news in relation to Roald Dahl. What's happening?
That's right. I mean, I think that this is a pretty rare instance where she spoke out against literary censorship. She told authors she wants them to remain true to their calling. And she thinks that this type of censorship limits authors' imaginations. And she's completely against that. She loves books, Mark. So there was actually a swift turnaround after all of this, controversy over Roald Dahl, and the publishers actually saying, well, we will continue to publish the original versions in addition to some of these bizarrely censored versions where they've replaced the word fat with enormous because that's less offensive.
Yes, this subtle hint comes, I would argue, from the playbook of the late, great Queen Elizabeth II, our last and late great monarch. She never got involved in politics, but she occasionally dropped hints, and I feel that's what Camilla has done.
She is so sophisticated, and she knows how to play the game. This was a natural comment. She's got a great sense of humor, and she's so personable. And I don't think she meant to cause a stir, but it certainly did. And I think the majority of people agree with her in this instance.
Definitely. Now, I don't like to kick a man when he's down, but tell me about your president, Joe Biden.
Yes, you do. And Mark, before this interview, I tried to find a fall count. It doesn't exist because there are too many. But President Biden on the way home from Poland, tripping down the stairs, Air Force One, typical Tuesday over here. But there is literally not a fall count because it happens so often.
Does no one talk about the president's health and his cognition?
We really have been as of late, especially with the idea of maybe we should perhaps have some sort of test that people have to perform after a certain age to determine whether they're, mentally and physically fit to be president. That's a conversation that's been happening over here. But it's pretty, I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed. That's not my president is what they said during the last one.
Let's talk about the last president, Donald Trump, who is concerned about what's happened in Ohio. Tell me more.
Yes. So Trump claims that his presence actually spurred the Obama administration to devote more time and resources to this Ohio town that's had this environmental meltdown. And, I would agree with him, Mark. I remember sitting there watching all of the news come out that Trump was heading to Ohio to deliver water, to be there with the people, to figure out if there was anything he could do, while I'm watching Joe Biden basically campaign all across the globe, hanging out with Ukraine. I mean, honestly, take care of us first. I know it's horrible to say, but take care of us first. And in typical liberal form, the mainstream media here are actually trying to blame Donald Trump for the accident in Ohio. Do you have that clip?
I understand we don't have it to hand, but it seems like an extraordinary claim to make.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it's The View, which is on ABC, one of our huge networks here. And there's an actual discussion where Joy, one of the hosts, says, I want the people of Ohio to know that Donald Trump, you voted for Donald Trump, as if to say that was karma for voting for Donald Trump. The audience audibly gasps. And then Sonny, one of the other hosts, says, I blame Donald Trump for this.
We've got the clip. Here it is. Take it away.
He placed someone with deep ties to the chemical industry in charge of the EPA's Chemical Safety Office. That's who you voted for in that district. Donald Trump, who reduces all safety. He did.
But he showed up at McDonald's and those voters saw something on the ground that probably resonates in a way that they need.
But they need to look past the photo ops, these people, and say, who's doing the job here? Forget about the photo op.
Showing up is a big thing. I think this is Donald Trump's fault.
Trump is the American equivalent of Brexit, to blame for everything, Kinsey.
I honestly sympathize with this guy sometimes, because I really do think it was kind of him to go there, to be with the people, to make them feel like someone was listening. And then, of course, then here comes the Biden administration. He's got a point.
Crazy. Listen, Kinsey, we'll see you a week tomorrow. Wish we had longer. The brilliant queen of US showbiz and political reporting, Kinsey Scofield. Next up, my take at 10, and my Mark Meets star is Victoria Hervey. See you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world. The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10 in just a moment, employees trialling a 4-day week have declared it a huge success. Of course they have. When did the West give up the work ethic? Who's going to pay the bills if workers aren't willing to put a shift in? The 4-day week might be convenient, but it's a race to the bottom. My Mark Meets guest live in the studio is Lady Victoria Hervey, the royal insider who has starred in reality TV shows, penned best-selling books and has been romantically linked to more than one very big name, including none other than Prince Andrew. Are those rumours true? We'll be asking her shortly. Plus tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30. Lots to get through, but my take at 10 is next, and I'm not pulling my punches. Why does no one want to work anymore? First, the headlines with the hard-working Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story tonight. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said tonight if the Allies keep supporting Ukraine, they will win the war. This after the UK marked 1 year since Russia first invaded his country. We held a minute's silence today. And as people across the UK pause to remember those who'd lost their lives in Ukraine, outside Downing Street, the Prime Minister reflected on the country's losses with Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. Britain today imposed new sanctions on Russia, including an export ban on equipment the country uses on the battlefield. And in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky attended a ceremony with families of soldiers killed in the conflict. He described the last 12 months as a year of pain and sorrow, but also of faith and unity. And the Prime Minister could soon announce a new post-Brexit deal for Northern Ireland after holding what was said to be a positive call with the EU Commissioner. Rishi Sunak is likely to meet Ursula von der Leyen to discuss the Northern Ireland Protocol this weekend. He's also expected to reveal a new deal by Monday. Number 10 says he's had constructive talks with supermarkets and businesses about the issues he's trying to fix. In an exclusive interview with GB News, James Cleverly told us how the government's approaching negotiations.
We remain focused on the outcome rather than the method, and the outcome is to protect Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom, to make sure that people and businesses and the political representatives of those people in Northern Ireland are comfortable with the resolution, whilst also making sure that we protect the UK internal market. Those are very much our motivations. That's what will drive our actions.
And you can watch Darren McCaffrey's exclusive interview with the Foreign Secretary in full tomorrow at midday, right here, GB News. Now, in other news today, detectives investigating the attempted murder of an officer in Omagh in County Tyrone have made a 5th arrest. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell remains in a critical condition after being shot outside a sports centre on Wednesday. Police in Northern Ireland say they're treating the incident as terrorist-related, with the new IRA their chief line of inquiry. And lastly, the publishing house Puffin UK has announced that Roald Dahl's classic collection will still be printed using the author's original descriptions and expressions. It follows criticism of the recent editing of his work to remove potentially offensive language. It's understood Puffin UK will continue with the publication of amended texts, as well as continuing to release the original versions. Camilla, the Queen Consort, yesterday urged authors to resist curbs on freedom of their expression. That's all from me for now. I'm back in an hour.
My thanks to Polly Middlehurst, who returns in an hour's time. This is Mark Dolan Tonight, a busy hour to come. Live in the studio, my Mark Meets guest is Lady Victoria Hervey, the royal insider who has starred in reality TV shows, penned best-selling books, and has been romantically linked to none other than Prince Andrew. What does she think about the Virginia Giuffre case? Plus Morris Papers at exactly 10:30 with full panel reaction. Lots to get through, but first, my take at 10. A bunch of workers at offices around the world trying out a 4-day working week have declared it a huge success. Of course they have. Of the 61 companies that entered a special 6-month trial, 56 have extended the 4-day week, including 18 who have made it permanent. Joe Ryle, the director of the 4-day week campaign, called the trial a major breakthrough moment, adding across a wide variety of sectors, well-being has improved dramatically for staff and business productivity has either been maintained or improved in nearly every case. When did the West decide to down tools and give up work? Do you think companies in China, India and South Korea, who are fast becoming the economic superpowers of our age, are also trying out a 4-day working week so that they can spend the other 3 days chillaxing, watching garbage on Netflix and consuming garbage courtesy of Deliveroo? Do me a favour, they're working 9 days a week. Do you remember the days when it paid to work? Now people are seeking to be paid to not work. After the indulgent and, in my view, completely failed experiment of lockdowns in which the government paid perfectly healthy people to stay at home, it seems that work has become an optional extra in people's lives. Except that with a national debt of over £2 trillion, a deficit in which more money now goes out than comes in, the idea of not working is not an option at all. We need economic growth to pay down the debt and to pay for the public services we all value so highly. And how is that achieved? Well, by everyone putting a shift in. It's deeply disturbing that 2.5 million people in this country of working age are not economically active. 2.5 million people. Are all of those people physically unable to work? Have they all got mental health issues? You tell me. But someone is going to have to pay for the country. And at this rate, it just looks like it will be you and me. And what a pair of mugs we are. Now, private companies are entitled to employ their staff for just 4 days a week, no problem. And if they've found productivity has gone up, then who am I to object? But it won't be long before the public sector start demanding a 4-day week as well, even though with the difficulties of getting a passport or a driving licence, or the long wait that you have on the phone to speak to any government department, it would seem they've gone down to a 4-day week already, or in some cases, what feels like a 0-day week. Cabinet Minister Therese Coffey got in hot water this week, hot coffee if you like, by saying those relying on food banks should upscale to get a better paid job or work more hours. Perhaps clumsily worded, and my heart goes out to any families who are struggling at the moment, and millions are. But what was technically wrong about what she said? It seems her egregious crime was to state a matter of fact and say something which is true. I think that the 4-day week is the road to ruin. If this country was swimming in cash with a massive trade surplus, with a minuscule national debt and huge annual growth, then happy days, knock yourself out. But that's not where we are. We are in an economic emergency, and we need shoulders to the wheel. We need sleeves rolled up. We need hard graft. Meanwhile, a new cohort of entitled employees won't work more than 4 days out of the week. What an insult to those working 7 days a week to make ends meet. A 4-day week? Forget it. Your reaction, Mark at gbnews.uk. Have you gone down to a 4-day week? Is it working out for you? Let me know. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport and beyond. Tonight, model, socialite, aristocrat and former it girl, we'll have to find out what that means, Lady Victoria Hervey. The eldest child of the 6th Marquess of Bristol, notwithstanding her gilded background, she went on to make a name for herself in the world of modelling, working for multiple fashion brands, including Christian Dior. She's done her fair share of reality TV, including Channel 5's The Farm, ITV's Love Island, and Channel 4's winter sports show, The Jump, an appearance on which we have in common. She wrote a best-selling book called Lady in Waiting, a semi-autobiographical tome for young adults, centering on life in a girls' boarding school. And she's been romantically linked to 1 or 2 celebrities, including Prince Andrew, no less. It's been quite the life and quite the story, and I'm delighted to say that former it girl and current it girl and future it girl, Lady Victoria Hervey, joins me now. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. So good to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
What is an it girl? Do you even know?
You know, it's the girl at the moment, you know, but it's so strange when they go, you know, past it girl or whatever. It's
a bit insulting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think
but it was like, but I was in that, it was the it girl era of that time, and there's never really been anyone that replaced us. So,
was fame fun?
Yeah, you know, look, when I first started being in the spotlight. In my early 20s. It was a different time as well, as far as like paparazzi world, because there was no social media. Now it's not as intense because people have their Instagrams and things. But back then, yeah, it was a little crazy. You know, you were followed home. You had the moped guys going down the alleyways. They'd be waiting for you outside your door. You'd have an after party the next day in the Evening Standard. All your friends would be in it.
But what you wouldn't do is go into the party and have people with mobile phones taking pictures of you indoors.
Well,
so there were some aspects of privacy, were there?
Luckily, my really wild days, there was no camera phones yet.
Yeah.
That was sort of like it was just starting, so very lucky.
I mean, you know, I was working at a radio station when the tragic news that Diana had died in a Paris car crash. Chased by paparazzi. You obviously, perhaps not on the same scale, but you got a flavour of that yourself. Can it be scary?
Yeah, of course it can be scary, yeah. Because you know, I was hacked, of course, like many other people, by newspapers, and you start thinking, well, how do they know this stuff? Like, you're only telling one person, and it's like in the newspaper. So you do sort of think, am I going crazy? And then you find out, oh, you were being hacked. So You weren't imagining it.
Did that affect any of your relationships? Because the issue with being hacked is that you think, well, wait a minute, I've said I'm going to go to Spain next week. I told my mate Bob.
It did.
Suddenly I don't trust Bob anymore, except that it wasn't Bob that they found out
Exactly.
from. They called your phone and could get your voicemail remotely. Is that right?
Yeah.
So did it, I mean, did you mistrust people? Did you get paranoid?
Oh, completely got paranoid. It definitely ruined some relationships. You know, I'd go on a date with someone and then suddenly it's already in the newspapers. I remember, like, as an example, Rio Ferdinand. It was just before, like, no one really knew him. He was at West Ham. And we went on a date and suddenly somebody knew about it. It was like, wait, hold on, like, this was a secret thing. Like, how did they know, you know? So he probably thought, well, I said something and I thought he said something, but actually, like, that kind of situation, it was like, well, actually, we were being hacked.
Yeah.
So it's many kind of things like that.
Yeah, and what about, you know...
But right now, it's like you just learn how to be more private, I suppose. You know, you don't go out to all the places that there might be... You know, if you want to be seen, you go to the places you want to be seen.
Do you think fame is more dangerous now than it was?
How would it be more dangerous now? No.
Less privacy?
I think now we're a bit more in control of it because we have social media. So if someone writes something, just say they say something about me, I can then go on my Instagram and actually go, well, actually, no, the real story is this. Before, 20 years ago, we didn't have an outlet like that. You know, it was just like, oh, if you knew somebody at the newspaper, say this. But now we can put it correctly, like straight away.
So you have the right to reply. I was just thinking of the likes of Caroline Flack, TV presenter, took her own life because just the pressure of social media attention seemed to be... I mean, I'm sure there were other factors too, but that can't have helped.
Yeah, I'm not on Twitter anymore. I find Twitter, it's just evil. It's like the dungeons of the darkness of... It's very scary, and I love that I'm not on it anymore. OK, well, look, you're on Mark Dolan tonight, and we love that you're on that very much. The it girl, Lady Victoria Hervey, with us. I think you'll agree, a fascinating conversation we've just started, and it's going to continue. We're going to talk about being a lady, an aristocratic background, but then financial challenges as well. No silver spoon here. Also, we'll talk about Prince Andrew. Was he done up by like a royal kipper by his accusers? We'll also talk about reality TV, fame, money, you name it. Lady Victoria Hervey is my Mark Meets guest. More after this.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, nah, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world. The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight and a Mark Meets special in the company of socialite, aristocrat, reality star, entrepreneur and model and it girl, no less. Yeah. By the way, I'm an it boy. So, and if you believe that, you'll believe anything. It's Lady Victoria Hervey.
Hello.
Alistair's kept the camera on you even when I'm talking, and I don't blame him. He's a man of taste. Director Alistair. You are Lady Victoria Hervey.
Yeah.
That must have its perks.
Yeah, of course it has its perks. You know, when I was younger, I really did not like having the title thing, and I hid it for as long as I could at school, didn't tell anyone. And then my grandmother wrote me at boarding school with a lady on, and I had to explain to friends what it was. Got outed. But it is, it definitely has its bonuses.
Good tables at restaurants.
Yeah.
Also, if you're having a bit of an argument with your other half, do you ever kind of drop the fact that you're a lady into the conversation?
No.
So he won't empty the dishwasher, he wants you to. You're like, I think you'll find
have a
out
dishwasher, yeah.
Lady Victoria Hervey.
Yeah,
because I can tell you, if I was Lord Dolan, I would use that against Mrs. Dolan relentlessly. Yeah, she'd never hear the end of it.
I don't use it in that kind of way.
You don't use it?
But it's just, I don't know, maybe going through an airport, it helps, going through security.
Yeah, and in America, it must be quite a big deal.
No, I remember when I started going through the LA security, and they're literally like, oh, Lady Victoria's like Lady Diana, they actually think I'm living at the palace.
But the thing is, it's easy to prejudge you and to assume that somehow you were born to riches, which is not the case, is it?
No, I mean, I had to work. I was at boarding school in England, and then I had a gap year, which, it was a very trendy thing to do, was having a deferred entry at the time, which probably shouldn't have done it because I had way too much fun in my gap year to go to uni. But I was going to be studying French and History of Art, and it's a 4-year course. Yeah.
And you skipped it.
St Andrews, Exeter, and Bristol. I got into all the universities.
Good universities.
I wanted to, all the ones I wanted to go to. And then I was travelling around Malaysia and Thailand for a couple of months, studied in Florence History of Art for about 6 months, Queen's Secretarial course, and then I started working and met someone. He was like 15 years older than me, and I suddenly got thrown into the social life of the London scene.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Are you a rebel?
I suppose I don't like abiding to the rules always, so maybe rebel at heart.
And you've left America. You've been in California for about 19 years?
Yeah, almost 2 decades, actually. Around 2004, I moved, and I just got kind of homesick, really, the last couple of years. And I just thought it was time to move back. California changed a lot. I mean, look, the world changed, but California really changed. And it just wasn't the place I wanted to be living.
Yeah, I mean, we just touched on it briefly during the break.
Super dangerous.
A lot of politics.
Exactly, like, America is completely polarised as far as the politics. So
if you're a Republican in California, you're evil, right? You're the devil's spawn.
You're really evil. They don't understand it. You have to want Joe Biden. Like, the guy doesn't even know what his own name is. So, I started being quite vocal about things, I suppose, around COVID. I started speaking out about the riots that we had, and, I started reposting Candace Owens, and It didn't go down so well.
Who is, I suppose, a conservative political commentator. That doesn't make you right-wing, I suppose,
No,
because
I mean-
there are many in America on the left, including the comedian Bill Maher, a complete lifelong Democrat supporter and lefty, who's challenged a lot of the kind of political correctness and woke stuff. He's now being called right-wing, even though he's been a lefty.
Well, a lot of people converted. Like, I never really followed politics that closely, to be honest. Like, until 2020, I voted for I wanted Obama. Can you imagine? Like, he created ISIS. Like, so I really had no idea about anything until a few years ago. And
but if you objected to some of the woke stuff, I suppose, the trans ideology, or what's kind of got your back up?
The trans thing is sick. Like, that to me is, the fact that they can chemically castrate a child so young in California I just think it's horrible. The parent goes to jail if they suddenly don't agree with their child transitioning. So you've now got all these young kids, and I don't know imagine what's going to happen to them in the next 10 years.
It's a real
worry. It's like an experiment because the drug companies make so much off each child, right, that transitions. So, you obviously probably watched the documentary What's a Woman?
Matt Walsh, yeah. Very, very powerful. And then, of course, that's before you even get to women's rights.
What is a woman? None of them could say a woman got ovaries.
And female-only spaces, which used to be sacred, which are now no longer. A double rapist in a Scottish prison.
I don't agree with any of the massive trans agenda that is going on.
Did you date Prince Andrew?
I don't want to go into it, because I do speak a lot about...
Business.
I speak... we just went out a few times, like literally.
More of a friend.
But I have a friend, and we've been, I have been obviously super vocal about everything going on because, this woman who accused him,
Virginia Giuffre.
He's never even met her, and
has he been done up like a right royal kipper? Has he been stitched
He
up?
had some really bad advice, I think. Basically, he had lawyers that were criminal lawyers for a civil case. So he had terrible advice. And, this girl has just lied her whole way through everything. I'm not even going to say I believe she is. She is.
What about that photo? The photo of him with his arms around her, dating back
the photo
15,
is nothing real about that photo. And I've spoken on TV for the last year now. There's probably, even Ghislaine said there's 50 things wrong with that photo, but there's so many things wrong with that photo. And I've actually seen pictures of that space. And when you actually measure the furniture, the table that's on the right-hand side in that picture, it's really high.
Tell me about the Andrew that you know. Is he a good guy? Has he been mischaracterised?
Yeah, well, obviously, like that interview was very badly advised. They had a representative for Buckingham Palace apparently in that interview. So it's almost like they wanted to set him up. That's how it felt like.
You almost feel like the firm, the royal family themselves, deliberately...
Well, I think there's been a lot, Charles, the older brother, has always been a bit jealous of him. He had a very successful...
military career.
Military career for 20 years, It's sort of like, well, he is the spare, isn't he, in this one?
So you think King Charles is potentially jealous of Andrew?
I've heard that he's always been jealous of him. So it's kind of like as soon as the Queen is gone, like, daggers are out,
Yeah. The Royal Lodge chucked out of there, or had it certainly having his
well,
income cut?
they've got time, but look, Charles has inherited how much money, and he can't now help his brother out. Basically, Prince Andrew was made to settle, right? He didn't have a choice, and then as soon as he was made to do it, they then just has been taking everything else away, little bit by bit.
What's next for you? Because you're so young. You're back in Britain. You look fabulous.
Thank you.
So what would you like to do next?
We will see. I'm just kind of getting feeling. I'm feeling it out. I love GB News. This is one of my favourite channel, really.
Great.
And I'd like to do more TV.
What is it about, without blowing smoke up our own derrieres? What is it about the channel that you like?
Well, we can say what we think, can't we? And we're not going to get cancelled. So.
Well, listen...
We're not censored on this channel.
You're right.
You know, I'm not going to get Susanna Reid, like, going crazy at me and going, oh, you can't say that.
Of course, it's
because
the ITV,
I called this girl a con woman.
The GMB presenter.
Called her a con artist, you know?
Virginia Giuffre.
Yeah, she's a con artist. I'll say it a million times.
OK.
So...
Well, look, a thrill to have you in the studio.
Good to see you too.
Do come back and see us soon. It's never boring when you're here. This
Oh,
show
thank you.
has a motto: we don't do boring, and that certainly doesn't happen when you're in the studio. Lady
Very good to see you.
Victoria Hervey. As a matter of record, it's important to say that Prince Andrew settled out of court in relation to the allegations made by Virginia Giuffre. She is very clear that a crime was committed, that she's a victim, and that everything she said is true. So she would challenge what Victoria has said. But this programme is all about opinions. So, what's yours, Mark, at gbnews.uk? We've got the papers next.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
It's time now for the papers. Hot off the press, we have the Daily Telegraph, and they lead with the following. Sunak to secure new Brexit deal this weekend. Rishi Sunak is hoping to close a Brexit agreement this weekend after Downing Street claimed he had gained last-minute concessions from Brussels. Number 10 said the government had achieved a string of positive breakthroughs during discussions over the past week to address problems faced by businesses as a result of the post-Brexit rules governing Northern Ireland. The Prime Minister spoke to Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, tonight, with further talks planned to seal the deal. The Daily Telegraph understands that arrangements are in place for the UK and EU to agree the deal as early as Sunday, with a legal text presented to Parliament on Monday. That's a fast-moving story. A good news story. Fantastic Mr. Dahl endures. Roald Dahl's books will be reissued in their uncensored form after a backlash forced the publisher into a retreat. Puffin said it had listened to the challenging and uncomfortable debate. I'm sure they listened. Aren't they nice? They are going to think again. Words relating to weight, height, mental health, gender and skin colour were removed from the original classics, and passages were added that were not written by Dahl. The backlash included criticism from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and an intervention by the Queen Consort. The Telegraph are saying it was an intervention by the Queen. I'm not sure that was physically possible. The Queen Consort. Oh, well, of course, we can call her the Queen now, can't we?
It's interesting to say that, because this has crept in, and, you know, Camilla got a very hard press for decades, but plenty of papers are calling her the Queen now.
Oh, my goodness.
It's creeping in.
I've only just noticed. So there you go. So a reprieve for Roald Dahl in the Telegraph. Next up, The Times. Brexit deal within days. Tell you what, Number 10 have been on the phone, haven't they, to Fleet Street with good news. Or is it good news? I'll be asking Kier Ranger, former advisor to Boris Johnson. Daily Express. Camilla forces U-turn in Dahl book cuts row. Also, prayers mark a year of pain, sorrow and unity. Ukraine 1 year on. The Guardian. PM set to seal post-Brexit deal in big political gamble. Well, this is becoming close to a solid story that you can stand up now. All the papers have got it. The Daily Mirror. Rod, you care it well. Pop legend in thank you visit to NHS workers. And Tories in a stew over turnips. Therese Coffey's advice to eat turnips in place of unavailable fresh produce yesterday sparked a run on the root veg. What a turnip. The Eye Weekend. Starmer on course for landslide victory. Labour currently heading for Tony Blair-style win at the next election, according to a brand new poll for the Eye. And opposition holds a 17-point lead and is expected to beat the Tories on most major policy areas except Ukraine. Voters say now they prefer Labour. They now prefer Labour on crime and Brexit, as well as housing, NHS and cost of living. Labour winning support on Brexit, I think, is a significant moment. The Independent. Victory for Camilla as she forces publisher to lift censorship on Roald Dahl's classic books for children. And Invincible. G7 to hit Russia with new sanctions as Sunak leads nation in a minute's silence to mark a year of war in Ukraine. Daily Star. Save our salads. Not such a cunning plan, milady. Government Minister Therese Coffey's cunning plan for us to eat turnips instead of tomatoes is in tatters after stockpilers stripped them from supermarket shelves. Yes, really, Baldrick. And those are your front pages. We've got the Mail on the way, but let's get reaction to what we've heard just now from my all-star panel, former editor of Labour List, journalist and broadcaster Peter Edwards. We also have best-selling author and presenter Laura Dodsworth, and political commentator and ex-advisor to Boris Johnson, Kier Ranger. Kier, lots of papers with news of a Brexit breakthrough, a deal with Brussels. The Daily Telegraph, who, let's be honest, have the ear of Number 10. Sunak to secure new Brexit deal this weekend.
Well, I think, as you said, the briefing has been done by Number 10, so undoubtedly there is something in the water here. But there has been a lot of effort put in here. We do know that this has dragged on for 2 years. We do know that we're in an era, actually, where everything that seems to be going wrong in the country, somebody can say it's down to Brexit, which I don't think that's necessarily the case. But the hesitation, the challenges to the people of Northern Ireland, and the idea of having a hard border on the island of Ireland is just untenable. And I think this will be a huge success, shot in the arm, for Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, if he can get this done. It also, dare I say it, confirms Boris's legacy in this conversation around bringing this through and saying that this would get resolved, although it has taken him to leave Number 10 for it to happen. But if it hadn't have happened, two of those things, both those things would have been in challenging mode politically. Boris's view on getting Brexit done, Rishi's ability to actually maintain Brexit and be the Brexiteer Prime Minister that can move the country forward. So this is a huge political moment for the Prime Minister.
Before I get to the rest of the panel, you're so connected to the world of Boris Johnson and the Tory party. Do you think the ERG and or the DUP will swallow this deal? And if not, does that matter?
I think they will, otherwise it wouldn't have been briefed so heavily. And there haven't been...
You don't think this is the PM going over their heads?
No, because we haven't had the discerning voices coming out saying they're not in alignment with this. We know the usual suspects. We know who they are. They would have been talking already about any problems they would have had with this deal. So on that basis... but I do think Rishi is not the kind of Prime Minister who would go over people's heads. He wants to get this done in his way, the right way, that he gets everybody lined up. And he is that sort of more consolidating, cautious, won't overstep the mark Prime Minister. That's his style. So this does have all the hallmarks of a deal that has been agreed.
Final million-dollar question from a man that knows him well. Will this deal get the seal of approval from Boris Johnson? Because he has been making trouble for the PM this week.
I don't think Boris has been making trouble. I think Boris is just trying to ensure that there is the integrity around the deal.
Can you say that with a straight face?
Yes. I spoke to Boris a couple of weeks ago, and I know exactly where he is viewing some of these things. And obviously, he doesn't want to be seen as a meddling Prime Minister who's just recently been out.
Well, that's not going very well, is it?
No, but well, both him and Liz Truss have also mentioned, obviously, their views on Ukraine and various other things. And I think that, in some way, that's helped the Prime Minister, because it gives the Prime Minister support from senior figures, former Prime Ministers, lining up to say, yeah, because this is the Prime Minister's agenda. He's not saying anything that isn't going against what the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is trying to achieve. He is a Brexiteer. He does want to get this deal done, and Boris is helping him shore that up.
Laura, dare we dream that the issue of Brexit could finally be put to bed?
It looks like we might be able to. Now, I can't add a fraction of what we've just heard. But
Do you not know Boris Johnson intimately well?
No, I'm afraid, although I made him the subject of chapter 2 of my last book, I have never met him. But I will say that, you don't need to worry, because if Brexit does get done, we can always blame everything on climate.
Oh, yeah, that's the next thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Laura, can I talk to you about Roald Dahl? Fantastic Mr. Dahl Endures. This is it's an intervention from most right-minded people. Salman Rushdie, the only author to have won the Booker Prize twice, called this outrageous censorship. This is Puffin, the publishers of Roald Dahl, who changed certain words in his books to make them less offensive, apparently, rewrote parts of it. Your reaction to the original story and your reaction to the U-turn?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely great that Camilla spoke up. I don't think she can claim all the credit for the U-turn because, as you say, every right-minded commentator, journalist and author has spoken out about this.
Apart from the woke ones.
Apart from The Guardian and a few woke ones, I think this is absolutely the right decision. I mean, there were hundreds of changes made to Roald Dahl's collection of works of fiction for children. And, you can remove the word fat from a page, but that doesn't actually stop there being fat people in the world. What these sensitivity readers did, apart from proving themselves to be the twits, was try to reimagine the world in the way they want it to be and rewire our brains by rewriting books.
So you think this is manipulation?
Of course it's manipulation, because they want to reimagine the world the way they want it to be. I think it was offensive to the readers of the book, as well as offensive to authors. I'll just quickly explain both. I mean, in terms of children, they like dark fiction, from Ring of Roses to The Hunger Games. Darkness runs through fairy tales.
Rumpelstiltskin is terrifying.
Of course, because...
He basically steals children.
All these stories are scary. If the sensitivity readers get hold of the Grimm's fairy tales, they're in for a big shock. Because children like this kind of thing. The darkness helps them to master their fears, actually. You can't sanitise the human brain, even if you sanitise the page. But the other thing it did, which really, put the chills up my spine as an author, is it took the authorship away from Roald Dahl and it put it somewhere in the future, as though it can just be handed from moral arbiter to moral arbiter. I think it's incredibly disrespectful to rewrite his words, and he'd be turning in his grave.
For sure. Peter, the censors are losing this one. Do you detect a change in the narrative now, a bit of an anti-woke movement? And I say that not necessarily as a tribal left versus right, because it was, of course, Tony Blair in an interview with The Guardian a year ago who said that in order to get into number 10, Kier Starmer should get rid of the woke stuff.
I'm not sure Kier Starmer has the woke stuff, but even a kind of a southern liberal lefty Europhile like me would say there's no place for censorship, and editing books, of ripping up books after a much-loved author has died is a nonsense. And every literary work is a product of its own time, and you shouldn't edit Roald Dahl post hoc. You shouldn't edit Shakespeare, read Othello. I'm sure you have. There's a lot in there of words we would use today. And I'm a churchgoer. There's a lot of scenes in the Bible that are not about peace and light, but are about conflict. But we don't rewrite them. You know, a literary work, an artistic work, stands on its own merits. You just need context.
Tories in a stew over turnips. Culvere, the Daily Mirror. So Therese Coffey has had a bit of a week to forget, hasn't she, PR-wise?
Turnips for the books, if I'm building a bridge there
Nicely
between
done.
the two. Sorry, thank you. Here all evening. So, yeah, she has. She's one of those ministers who seems to not have a way with words.
Or is she just honest?
Well, honesty, but you do want to get the message across to people that I think that and the fundamental problem I actually had with this and other sort of Conservative parliamentarians wanting to tell people what they should be eating. Now, that's instinctivly not where the Conservatives normally
just
are.
A bit of honest politics, a bit like Lee Anderson, who just says,
Bring back hanging.
Well,
It's not
maybe
quite
bring
the
back
same.
hanging, but Lee Anderson said if you're on over 30 grand a year and living from food banks, you need to look at your budgeting, right? He becomes public enemy number one. All Therese Coffey's saying is if you can't get hold of, tomatoes, try root vegetables, which, by the way, are in season at the moment, and very good value. So my co-op, I bought a Swede for 50p today. Felt very proud of myself.
Well, I think this is one of these stories that's
Vegetable, not a foreign national.
It's very funny because it's great to make Baldrick comparisons and all the rest of it, but it actually highlights some quite interesting undercurrents. I have to disagree that the Conservatives don't tell people what to eat, because they all do. And in fact, they're bringing out some new fitness app which encourages you to eat your 5 a day, which, by the way, there is no evidence for whatsoever. Won't surprise you.
Especially fruit, which is full of sugar, right?
Totally. Now, you and I don't really buy all this fruit and vegetable stuff. We've talked off air. We're both quite low-carb people. But if you're going to eat vegetables, you should eat vegetables that are in season. That's environmentally friendly. It makes sense. It's good for everybody. So the idea of having tomatoes all year round is, it's nice. It's nice to have choice. But is it really the end of the world to be eating seasonal vegetables in your own country? We don't naturally grow tomatoes in these parts in the winter.
There you go. Should we turn to turnips? Let me know, Mark, at gbnews.uk. We've got more from the papers next, including tomorrow's Mail newspaper with quite a headline. See you shortly.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Reacting to the big stories of the day, the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. Great to see Peter again, as well as a very old friend of mine, Laura Dodsworth, best-selling author. A State of Fear, it's out now. It's all about the psychology behind the COVID measures. A bestseller, a must-read. And her latest has just been sent to the publishers. Let's hope it hasn't got anywhere near the sensitivity readers. Their heads will explode. They'll be in counselling. And Kulveer Ranger, political commentator and former advisor to Boris Johnson. You spoke to Boris 2 weeks ago. He must be loving life at the moment.
He is. He's very happy.
Making a few quid.
He did mention that, so he paid for lunch. But he's very happy. He's very busy. Boris always finds a way to keep himself busy. But I think you always, as a politician, I've had a lot of friends who've been politicians and then stepped out of being frontline politicians. There's that moment where you think, what am I going to do with all this time? I think that isn't a challenge that a man like Boris Johnson faces.
Because he can write books.
He has plenty of talents and he has lots of things that he wants to do.
Speeches, broadcasting, you name it.
And sorry to say this, but one more investigation to face as well.
And all the other
Might
things
keep
that...
him busy.
He's actually very busy in his constituency, also looking at what's happening in London, a lot around the expansion of the ULEZ in London and challenging that. So, yes, he is very busy politically, personally, professionally.
Do you think he fancies another tilt at number 10?
That isn't something that I could probably comment on. That
One day?
I would never say never when it comes to a politician of Boris's capabilities. What I would say.
Kulveer, may I dive in on this one briefly, which is... it was only a few months ago he was photographed in an office in Millbank Tower in a leadership race on the telephone. What does that tell us?
No, I think that... Are you talking about when, he had the numbers and people were asking him to come back into...
When Liz Truss was imploding, and he was photographed on a telephone and I think got around 100, 102 Tory MP backers. That is the behaviour of someone, and everyone's entitled to be ambitious, who is desperate to come back, even though there's an investigation pending at the House of Commons over whether he told porkies or not.
Look, what I would say is, and I've said this many times, Boris Johnson is a unique politician, even in the House of Commons, and is still a very popular politician amongst his party and amongst the membership of the Conservative Party, and dare I say it, maybe even out there in the public. So popular politicians, hard to come by, and sometimes that popularity leads to them feeling that they can do things, come back.
Negative approval ratings when he left office.
And nearly every politician has them when they leave office. That doesn't mean that they can't come back.
Well, look, an interesting debate. Do you think he'll give up his safe seat? Do you think he'll give up his unsafe seat and leapfrog into a safer seat at the next election?
I think he's very much looking forward to fighting Uxbridge.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Well, look, there you go. Let's now have a look at our final front page. And it is the Daily Mail. And they lead with the following. Don't let killer husband go free. A grieving mother tonight begged the Justice Secretary to keep her daughter's killer behind bars. Airline pilot Robert Brown battered his estranged wife, Joanna Simpson, to death with a claw hammer within earshot of their 2 young children. He's due for automatic release this year after serving just 13 years of a 26-year sentence for manslaughter. Also, King and William to refuse Harry's apology demand. This is a coronation exclusive, courtesy of the Daily Mail. Generation gap, Harry and Charles are in a stalemate. Let's get reaction from Peter Edwards. How would you handle this if you were King Charles? Would you apologise to Harry and Meghan?
Well, we don't know the details, but what I certainly wouldn't do is apologise in the public. And I think, you know, Prince Harry's had a very difficult life. He and William lost their mother at a young age. They're both war heroes. But I think as a general rule, in any family, prince or pauper, if you go on TV and say your dad's a rotter, it's not very nice, is it?
Not really. Laura, I know you're not a psychologist, but there's a lot of psychology in your book. This is complicated, the dynamics between these family members. You've got egos, you've got royal titles, you've got history. Where do you start with this one?
Well, this isn't going to be the answer you want, but I start with trying not to comment on it at all, because I don't really like commenting on the soap opera that is now the royal family. I think that airing your dirty washing in public is not a good thing to do, like Peter just said, and apologies made and accepted should be something that happened in private.
Interesting. Good answer. I can't argue with that. Now, listen to this. How can I get out of his snooty sister's holiday? That was the headline in Colleen Nolan's Agony Aunt column this week, and it got us to thinking, how many horrendous holidays, pathetic parties and grim get-togethers have we endured just to placate a beloved or maybe not so beloved family member? Are we a nation of people pleasers? Laura?
Oh, of course we are. It's a British characteristic. People pleasing runs through us like words in rock. But I tell you what, you can practice. You can practice. I used to be such a people pleaser, and I think it's a particular type of social conditioning that women have as well. Controversial, I know, but I think women are definitely brought up to be...
in the workplace, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we're just brought up to be more conciliatory. But it's something I noticed about myself, you know, when you get to ripe old middle age, and just practice being a little bit more assertive. And I tell you what, it can still feel uncomfortable, but I don't say yes to people automatically anymore.
All right, what do you say? Do you say maybe? Like a holding pattern.
Oh, no, you've got me. You've read me right. Sometimes I say maybe, but sometimes I'm just honest. I'm just honest. Honesty's the best policy.
What do you think? Is the word no in your vocabulary, Peter?
Yes, it is. I think about that one. But actually, I don't think we're people pleasers particularly, but I think there's something else quite similar which unites us all, black or white, rich or poor, north or south, English or Scottish, which is standing in queues, apologising. I think we're...
Even when you get your own toe stepped on?
Yeah, and I think that's very British to apologise out of awkwardness, and one or two others, but drinking tea, standing in queues and saying sorry all the time helps make us British.
Too right. Kulveer, have you gone to things that you didn't want to in your life because you're too polite?
I unfortunately think I may come across as polite, but I'm not too polite. I just can't be bothered to be doing things I don't want to do. And I've always been a bit impatient in that way. And so sometimes that may come across as hard or rude. I don't mean to. I apologise to everyone who may have felt that from me.
You seem so charming and avuncular, but actually there's a hard side.
I've managed to create that veneer.
But actually it's not hard, it's just honest, isn't it?
I'm just being honest to myself as much as anyone else.
So you're OK with saying no? And
say
you can
no,
be quite firm.
be honest.
I remember my lovely wife is German, and the Germans are quite direct, OK? They're not unkind or rude, but they're direct, which is interpreted as those two other attributes. And we were looking for a flat to rent when we first met, and we walked around, and I was saying to every landlord, what a lovely place you've got, such amazing carpet, love the roof, we'll be in touch. My wife would say, I do not like your apartment, we will not be renting it.
But that's because you work in TV, darling, and people are polite.
I'm a lovey. And she had them in tears, but it's good to see a landlord in tears. Can I say it's been a joy to have all three of you tonight. Kulveer Ranger, Laura Dodsworth, Peter Edwards. Great debate. Do come back soon, one and all. Most importantly, thank you to you for your company. It's been 3 hours. That's 2 feature-length movies, isn't it? Without the nudity or action scenes. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll do it all again tomorrow. Headline.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no.